This one isn't going to be controversial at all. Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America.
And you ain't black.
I don't know what I said.
The first time ever any...
What are you people?
We're Americans.
We are Americans indeed. My name is Vincent, and this is Middle America with Vin and Story, where we're not left wing, we're not right wing, we're just right. If you want to continue the conversation, you can, free of charge, facebook.com/America Middle, and you, dear listener, will be able to speak to your heart's content about whatever you want. I encourage you to be as respectful and honoring of the other people in the channel as you possibly can be, but it is a free speech environment, dear listener, so even yours truly at times have had to take a break from dealing with folks. These are very, very trying times, very emotional times, and emotional intelligence is so rare that everybody thinks they're just supposed to jump on everything, and that's not always the case. Anyway, Donald John Trump is the current president of the United States of America. In the last, I think it was 2 to 3 weeks of his during the runoffs, during the elections, he spent over $100 million on the Kamala is for they, them, but Trump is for you or whatever. And it was extremely effective. According to everybody, it was extremely effective, and moved 2% of the electorate. Remember, Trump had what, 76, and Kamala had 74, so close to 150 million people. So 2% of 150 million is a lot of people. So it was an extremely influential and effective ad. I had been sounding the alarm for years, particularly last year, especially when Anna Kasparian came out and said she did not want to be labeled a birthing person. And I looked at that as a line of demarcation and a red flag, because I said Anna Kasparian is currently the queen of the progressives. TYT is the home of progressives. I know a lot of progressives, particularly Applejack, if he sees this video, when he sees this video, who will disagree with me. I have been mocked incessantly by my own people for I don't know, defending Anna or even holding any credence to what she has to say. Look, man, I just think, as a black person in America, you never have, and you're never going to have a perfect candidate or a perfect anything. So, I'm a little bit more nuanced than most. But even my own black brethren, Applejack, who I learn from every day politically, to be honest with you, called this stuff out. I'm not very good at calling out people like that, whatever. Anyway, Anna Kasparian came out and said she didn't like the term birthing person, and that completed her exile and excommunication from the progressive left, a movement that she helped to build. And quite frankly, she was it still is to some degree, in my opinion, the most adept communicator of those progressive positions. I discovered Anna and TYT after Bernie Sanders. So I saw the Bernie Sanders Killer Mike interview. I was immediately converted to Medicare for All. I then went Google to try to find more Bernie Sanders, and I landed at TYT. And I sat and listened to what they had to say. Now, look, I was not, and still am not, very politically sophisticated. So I didn't understand all the lingo and things of that nature. And so as a person who was kind of like on the outside of the movement, but was interested, because you're like, well, shit, this Medicare for All thing is really, really cool. And I hadn't even thought of that. What else what else do these people actually believe? I thought to myself, like, the only thing I know about the Democrats or neo-libs or whatever, or the left, I actually at the time thought the country was left or right. I didn't understand mediating positions. I didn't understand neoliberalism, etc., etc. Since starting the channel, you guys honestly have just educated me on that stuff, because now you see the nuance, and the nuances sometimes can be very obvious once you're aware of them. So Anna, between Anna and Jink is the bluster, the emotionalism, the I'm angry. Anna, to me, was a lot more technical in her approach. I mean, you can see this in the difference between the debate between Anna and Ben Shapiro at Politicon versus the debate between Cenk and Ben Shapiro. Shapiro destroyed Cenk. He reduced Cenk to a blubbering sort of guy who began arguing with the audience. Like, literally, he was arguing with the audience, telling the audience to Google it. The next year, Anna took up the mantle instead of Cenk, which I thought was very wise, and she held her own and got some zingers in her own. My point is, Anna Kasparian, to me, is the greatest articulator of a progressive or a left-wing agenda. I got a lot of love for Emma Vigeland, but it doesn't seem to me that debate is her thing. I'm not necessarily persuaded by it, Emma. Emma kind of speaks assumptively, right? There's certain axioms that she holds to, which is cool, but she's got certain axioms that she holds to that she imposes on the listener, and so there's a lot of things that just like go over her head because she's assuming things that the listener is not. Anyway. Anna Kasparian said that. I was talking about this last year. I said, listen, if Anna is saying this, that means there are millions of left-leaning, college-educated white women, or white women in general, that are not cool with how far things are going in the community and the movement. And so I took that as a clarion call, dear listener, because the scripture says, the wounds of a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. And there isn't one group on the country. It used to be black people, but I believe the trans have taken us over. There is not one group of people on the country more covered with enemy kisses than the trans community. You got all these people, all these SJWs, woke warriors, blah, 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 and not a single one of them warned them about what was to come in this election season. Not a single one. I'm not going to toot my own horn here or whatever, but okay, I have been warned. I've been sounding the bell for 2 years. And when Anna came out, you know, I had a kind of an emergency kind of feeling about it, because I'm like, yo, if these people don't start adjusting now, if these people can't interact well with Anna, who's on their team, then they're going to be in a lot of trouble come election time. I knew that Trump was coming back, and I thought that this was a major handicap for them. But you know what happened? Here's what happened. There was supposed to be a red wave in 2022 after Joe Biden won the election. So there was supposed to be a red wave in 2022. And last time we had midterms, Mr. Trump demonized immigrants and was talking about ISIS and MS-13 and all the rest of it coming to our borders. So the boys in ISIS went from Iraq. They took a plane from Iraq, went through Venezuela, and through Mexico into America. And shout out to the Trump supporters, but there wasn't a lot of reverse fact checking from the Trump supporters. and so, like, yeah. So every midterm, the Republicans find a bad guy to demonize and terrorize people with, right? In 2022, the bad guy was trans people. Trans this, trans that. Bill O'Reilly, Tucker Carlson, everybody, trans. You would have thought that America was comprised of like 78% trans. The way these Republicans went after it. You know what happened? They got washed. Why? It's very simple. We were 2 years into the Biden administration, and I do not believe that what I'm about to say can be laid at the feet of Joe Biden. the fact of the matter is, everybody took a year off, okay? Or we took 6 months off, or however you want to characterize 2020. And when you do that, the economy is going to take a little while to bounce back. That's just a fact. That's what happens. And so everybody thought, well, shit, man, these Republicans it's going to get real bloody in the 2022. Nope. Because instead of dealing with the economy, stupid, like James Carville famously said, instead of doing that, they decided that they were going to put trans people front and center. This critical race theory in trans people. And it flopped miserably, bless God. And we're all very happy about that flop. And so in 2024, so between 2022 and 2024, you started seeing the community get more and more aggressive. And I think the reason for that is they took the 2022 victory or the lack of the red wave. They took that to mean, hey, America has turned a corner. We finally made it. They put us up as the problem and they still lost horribly. That means we now have the upper hand. And remember, at the time, all the social media outlets were firmly in the grips of these folks. And so you couldn't say anything that was offensive. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't share contrary information. You would get banned. They do all types of crazy shit. And so they had an upper hand. And when they had an upper hand, this is really interesting because this is usually true of, anyway, when they had their upper hand, they went ballistic. They started with the what do you call it? The drag show stuff. They started with the pride stuff, and granted, in super internal conversations, I saw debates between trans individuals amongst each other talking about kink at pride and should kids be at pride and all the rest of it. Rest in peace to my homie, Runaway Siren. She covered a lot of those. And so, there was a lot of trans aggression after the 2022 election, and maybe aggression is probably too heavy. Why don't we just celebration, right? If you look at what it's like to actually have gender dysphoria, and then to be able to find a solution and a loving community, and then people of influence who will watch over you and protect you, that must be a great feeling. As a black person and as a man, I don't know what that's like, but it must be a great feeling. And so a lot of it was just trans people saying, hey, I can go out, I can be expressive, I have a little less fear. And for the most part, it was that kind of a celebration. But there was a small contingent of very dark individuals who took that as carte blanche to further an agenda of, quote, sexual liberty that involved children. And so what we began to see was people showing up at libraries in full drag. I've got videos of a dude in nothing but chaps shaking his ass in front of a room full of kids and saying things like, thank God for people who lick us where we pee. Saying that in front of children. And I said, whoa. Time out. This is not good. This is horrible. And I got called a transphobe. I got called all types of shit. And I was just thinking to myself, what is going on here? Like, what are we doing? These are kids. What are you doing? And then the anti-pass period thing happened, and I said, well, there's going to be a really big backlash against y'all. If you think left-wing women and democratic women and neoliberal women are cool with their little 4-year-old hearing, thank you God for those who lick us when we pee. Can you imagine, you're having your little egg after school with your parents, because my mom used to have a little boiled egg for me when I used to come home from school. Can you imagine your mom says, well, what'd you learn today? Well, I learned about geometry. I learned about perpendicular lines. And I also learned that we need to thank God for the things that he gives us. And your mother says, that's right. That's amazing. You need to thank God for... Well, what do you mean by that? He's like, well, we have to thank God for the people who lick us where we pee. Little 5-year-old. Do you think Mama Anna Kasparian is cool with that? She's not cool with that. But is Mama Kasparian gonna roll up on you and jam you up and say, what the fuck did you say to my daughter? Is she gonna do that? No! What did I say, dear listener? I said over and over again, white women are not socialized to be violently confrontational in public or private. White women in America are not given tools at an early age to negotiate. They're not given tools at an early age to understand concepts of leverage and things of that nature. I made sure my daughters do, but they're not socialized that way. Okay? And I was saying this over and over and over again all year from 2022 onward. I said, these women are going to smile in your face and then destroy you in the voting booth. Because they all saw what you did to Anna. They all believe the same things that Anna believes, but they don't want to go on a cross like Anna had to. So they're going to say, that's right, trans women are women. And then when it's time to vote at a local level about some statute or at the ultimate level about something, they're going to tear you up in the voting booth. That's what I said, and that is exactly what has happened. Now what has happened is, because there was no check to the extremists and the kid stuff, because there were no checks and balances about that from inside the community, now we have hundreds of videos of crazy shit happening, and we also have one guy in the White House named Mr. Donald J. Trump. And Mr. Trump, as you guys know, has written a litany of executive orders. This must break some records somewhere. A litany of executive orders, and quite frankly, there's almost been one every day, and it's so much, it's called flooding the zone, I guess, that nobody really can keep up with it. And one of those is that he officially declared that America is only going to recognize two sexes, male and female. And when they did a poll as to how Americans thought about what he did after week one, he had like a 53% satisfaction rate. This is after he let go of all the J6ers, which I was pissed about. This was after the things that he said, whatever. Him passing two anti-trans, I can't even say legislation. He just made executive orders. There was no, I guess that's legislation. I'm not sure. But he just made these executive orders that if he were to say on Twitter, here's the irony. He just made an executive order that there's only two sexes, male and female. That's it. That's the only thing that will be recognized by America. If Trump would have said that as a simple tweet in the year 2019, he would have gotten banned. So like, this is a weird world we're all in now. On the one hand, and then of course Trump does it surrounded by a bunch of little girls, and people were saying, oh, where are the people of color? Well, one, there was a little mixed race black lady in there, but two, the fact of the matter is that the only people that you have to understand that you live in the United States of America, and America is populated by mostly white people. And I say it's God, but you can easily get there by saying evolution. We are evolved, because what's the name of the game? Let's say God out of the picture for a second. What's the name of the game in Darwinianism? It's life will find a way, right? The strongest survive. You replicate these genes, and then you pass them on to the other progeny, etc., etc., etc. That's the name of the game. Well, there are certain ways of living that promote that, and certain ways of living that don't, right? But the ability to discern the difference between male and female goes to the core fundamental understanding of evolution, in the sense of we need to be able to distinguish who we can pair with in order to create another set of DNA signatures like we have. In other words, I need to be able to say this is a mating partner, like boom, right off the bat, because that time takes a lot of things out of the way so that we can engage in negotiation in order to replicate genes, right? So the ability to discern between the chirality of mating partners is kind of important. You also need to be able to make those distinctions because biological men are always going to be a threat to biological women just because of the fact that men are stronger than women. They're more constituted for war. They have more stamina. I don't have to go through all this, etc., etc. Okay? So we were evolved in order to understand that who we're supposed to mate and pair with so we can continue to progenitate the gene pool. And we were also evolved, particularly women were evolved, to be able to discern the difference between men and women because they're not safe around biological men in principle. And so with that knowledge, whether you're a Christian who believes in the Bible as I do, or you're a secularist who believes in what I just explained about evolution, or you're both, go to biologos.com. You'll see an entire website dedicated to the harmonization of Christianity and evolution. My point is, those are the two dominating worldviews in America right now, particularly in the political space. So people who believe that we came about by Darwinian macroevolution, I could pretty much throw a rock and hit 9 people. 8 of them are going to believe that, right? The rest of us evangelical Christians, we believe that God made them male and female because God said God loves us so much that he wants billions of us all over the place. And so in order to do that, we unfortunately have to have a lot of sex and have a lot of kids, right? So either way. Now, if you are in a community that is diametrically opposed to both of those worldviews, it doesn't mean you cannot live and exist in that context, and you can't thrive in that context. You can. You just have to walk with wisdom, and you have to be persuasive. But unfortunately, our friends in the community or the leadership structure within the trans community said, nope, we're not going to do that. We're not going to convince anybody of anything. We're not going to persuade people. We're just going to get you banned. We're going to report you. We're going to get a whole army of people to report you and get you banned. Y'all don't remember that? You get 5-6 people, they put a complaint about you, you get suspended for X amount of days, etc., etc., etc. Right? And this was one of the reasons why there was such a backlash to Elon Musk purchasing Twitter. Because Elon was saying, nah, man, like if you say some reckless shit, like you should be able to say that. It's free speech. All right. I've been watching left-wing reactions to various things that Trump has done. And watching this one infuriated me. I am really concerned for young trans adults. I'm very, very concerned for young trans adults. And this, young trans teenagers to adults. I'm extremely concerned. And I don't get afraid a lot. But I am nervous for the implications of this video. So let's check it out and we can see what I'm talking about. Here we go. This is Council of Geeks, by the way. They're a pretty good.
Sorry, I don't have a pithy opening for this one.
She does Doctor Who.
Get the opening.
Like she's like a Doctor Who, giant Doctor Who fan, comics, that kind of thing. You can see right there, her background's pretty badass. It reminded me of my room when I was a kid, only nowhere near as organized. Nowhere near as organized. So shout out. This is Council of Geeks. And honestly, guys, no BS. Like she does more, she doesn't like, it's not a political channel, but once in a while, like she'll talk about it if she feels a compulsion to talk about it. So I just wanted you to know who she was. Like if you're a Star Wars person, it's more like in the Jesse Gender kind of space, but not like exactly like Jesse Gender. So all right, so here we go. They know each other and they've collaborated and stuff too. So there you go. Okay, so this is Council of Geeks reacting to Trump's executive orders relative to trans people.
Statement that everybody is expecting out of the way. I never wanted to make a video like this. I don't like talking straight up politics, and there's a reason I usually filter these conversations through the lens of media analysis, but I have to do this. And I have to do it bluntly. Because things have already gotten so bad, so quickly, and will get worse. And if I don't say something, that fact is going to hang over me and weigh down everything I do until I say what I need to say.
I wish y'all would stop with that. They're really bad now, and it's going to get worse. How? Mr. Trump says America recognizes two sexes, male and female. Here's my problem when adult trans people make statements like this. In a vacuum, I don't have a problem per se. They're using dramatic language in order to convince people. It's part of rhetoric. She doesn't mean to say, she doesn't really believe that things are really, really bad now for trans people. You know how I know that? Because she's not an internet native, dear listener. You know what an internet native is? It's somebody who only knows the internet and social media. Like your formation came up in the context of the internet and social media. So you got a lot of really young people who truly believe that the way things are now is the way things have always been, and Republicans are trying to initiate some crazy change, and we don't know what's going to happen. You see this in things like abortion. Like they'll say, oh, so if a woman has a miscarriage, are we going to put her in prison? And I'd say things like, well, I mean, did we put them in prison in 1972 when they had miscarriages? They don't know what I'm talking about. They don't understand the point of the question. Abortion was not legal in 1972. See what I'm saying? It got passed in 73. Roe v. Wade was 73, right? So prior to that, we were not jamming up women and throwing them in prison. Now the elders in the pro-abortion community, they knew that. But they would go out and post this stuff all over the place. Cecile Richard, God rest her soul. Cecile Richards was going around telling, oh yeah, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. They didn't believe none of that. They didn't believe it. They understood. We all understood it was rhetoric. It was rhetoric. That's it. This stuff, where if a trans person doesn't get something they want, and we immediately jump to the genocide route, or we immediately jump to this, and it's going to get worse, and all the rest of it, is more rhetoric. It is hyperbolic exaggeration of a given point in order to stir people to an action. Okay? That's what that is. You use appeals to emotion, you use very fiery words because you're trying to convince somebody to see your perspective. And in isolation, I have no problem with that. My problem, though, is that young girls and boys who watch this woman, who are internet natives, don't know that that's what she's doing. They're taking it literally. I had a serious problem last year, a year and a half with someone, and to be honest with you, never really looked at the person the same way again. They kept using the term genocide. So a bathroom bill would come out or something like that, and they would jump to genocide. I'm like, do not use that fucking word. That is not what's happening. Stop saying that. Now look, it's my page on Middle America. I could have censored him. I didn't. But I said, this is not good because this is all just posturing an argument from emotion. It's rhetoric. It's powerful rhetoric. The problem is these kids are looking at you and taking this shit literally. They're a young person. When you see somebody get on YouTube or TV and they say, the orange fascist in the White House, you could know in that moment that that person doesn't really believe that Trump is a fascist. You know why? Get into a time machine, young person, and get dropped off in the year 39, and you go up in the middle of the town square and say, hear he, hear he. The little fascist with the weird haircut said XYZ. You and your body would be separated forever if that happened. Why? Because Hitler was actually a fascist. You do not get to mock a fascist when he's in power. You do not get to come up with all kinds of crazy names. You do not get to impeach a fascist. You don't get to do any of those things. A real fascist is, you convinced? Yeah, you're convinced. Okay? So, young people, none of these people believe what they say. This is just rhetoric. If there's anything I can tell young trans people at a practical level, your leaders are failing you. Your leaders are using rhetoric and rhetorical devices and hyperbole to impose themselves on a society that they refuse to patiently instruct so as to convert in a way of thinking or persuade. The people that are leading your movement, dear young person, were all socialized, most of them, as white males in America. And you know, young person, especially if you're on the left, that there's such a thing as male privilege and white privilege. What has happened to your movement, dear young person, is that the people who were raised and socialized and came to formation as white men in America, which puts you at the top of the pile of all of humanity, which comes with certain axiomatic assumptions about what you deserve, etc., etc. When a group of those people is now an ultra minority, their mindset is not adapted to, oh, I'm an ultra minority now. Oh, I have less leverage now. Men are socialized with the understanding about power and how to use it. So what is happening is you've got people who were raised a certain way and have a certain mentality, transition for whatever reason, but their minds haven't transitioned. They're still walking the earth with the assumption of their superiority that they were raised with, and nobody can blame them. A fish doesn't know it's wet. But what happens is this person knows that what she's saying is rhetorical. I know what she's saying is rhetorical, but you, young person, are going to take what she has to say literally, because look at how serious she is. We continue.
This sort of video isn't going to be what the channel becomes. But I can't, in good conscience, talk about things like Doctor Who, or Star Wars, or Marvel, or whatever else, without knowing I've said something about...
I'm still looking for this lady's Gaza video. So it's Council of Geeks. If any of you can find me the Gaza video, I'd be much appreciated. We continue.
What's happening? This channel, going forward, will still be what it's always been, and maybe it'll be a refuge for some of you. It often is for me. But I can't be silent today.
I mean, aside from this stuff, which I think is really psychologically deleterious to the mind of a child, especially a trans child, the other stuff is really cool, what she does. You know, Doctor Who. I'm not really a fan of Doctor Who. Don't really understand the Doctor Who phenomena. But if you want to understand about Doctor Who, you should check out her channel. Because, honestly, like, it's deep dives. I think some of it are spoilers. I don't care about spoilers because I don't like Doctor Who. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah. I mean, I would genuinely recommend the site. Not to a young person because of the nonsense she just said. But, you know, I haven't seen the rest of the video. So we continue.
Finally, before we get too far into this, I don't want anyone to think that my talking about trans issues is implying that the stomping on trans rights is the only or even the biggest problem that's going on right now. It's what I'm going to focus on, but yeah. Right now, everything is getting worse for anyone who isn't worth at least $100 million.
It's just not true. It's not true. But this is, again, young person, what we call hyperbole, what we call rhetoric. Only people 100 million and above are benefiting from the Trump administration, right? Like, we all know that that's not true, okay? Well, I don't know, young people, but that's not true. It's not true. But that's an example of rhetoric, because what she really means is the people that are going to feel the best about what Trump is doing are people in the 1% upper middle class, right? Like, when, so that's what she means. She doesn't really mean the 100 million thing, okay? But that's what she means. We continue.
And that harm is exponentially worse for marginalized groups, be they immigrants, people of color, people with disabilities, on and on and on and on.
I don't know how Trump is hurting people with disabilities. Right? Like, people like they create this like laundry list of people that Trump is against or whatever, but there's very little like, and here it is. See what I'm saying? So when you're listening to not just these people, anybody, think critically. Where are the sources? Where is this coming from? That type of thing. We continue.
And the fact that Trump and his cronies shout DEI over literally everything, with the right's current use of DEI being probably the most unsubtle dog whistle yet for literally anyone who isn't straight, white, male, cisgender, non-disabled, and ideally Christian.
Don't know why she brings up the disabled thing again, but I agree. I mean, I kind of agree. The plane crash being a DEI thing is crazy to me. And the other thing is, white dudes, cishet straight white dudes, turned out to be the biggest DEI cases ever. When Elon Musk talked about getting the engineers and the HB1 visas or whatever, getting the engineers from India, all the white boys, all the tough non-snowflake white boys got on and said, America first. And then Vivek Ramaswamy, who mistakenly believed that the Republican Party had somehow evolved beyond seeing race, or maybe the race stuff was exaggerated by the left or whatever. Vivek goes on a very eloquent and I believe true breakdown of the fact that there's been a lot of allowance of mediocrity. And so when you allow and you celebrate a lot of mediocrity, when you then have to compete with the world, you're going to lose. So Vivek was basically saying, yeah, man, I'm going to these Indians because you white boys, you guys are mediocre. You've been able to be mediocre your whole life. That was the end of him with Doge. You notice he went into hiding. They sent that boy into hiding. Now, Elon started it. And if Elon looked like an indigenous South African, I promise you, he'd be in South Africa right now. I promise you that. So let that be a learning. Don't ever forget when you're around these Republicans that you're black, because I promise you, they'll never forget it. And Mr. Ramaswamy forgot who he was and who he was dealing with. Okay, DEI. It is true, man. The plane crashed. The DEI hire. People saying you were racist and sexist for saying that Kamala was a DEI hire. I'm sorry, but like literally, Mr. Biden basically invoked literally those terms. But I do think, like, when you have Charlie Kirk saying, man, if I see a black pilot, I don't know. I mean, obviously that has racial ramifications, and anybody who says otherwise is ridiculous. So I'm going to give you 50% on the DEI thing. It is true. Like, you guys need to stop, like, attaching DEI to everything. You guys won, right? Like, we can get rid of DEI with a single stroke of the pen at this point. We continue.
It shows the utter contempt for all of us that we are held in. I know we are all in danger, but I can't cover all of it.
I am not in any special danger. My wife is not in any special danger, and my black sons are not in any special danger that they weren't under the Biden administration. So I don't know what this individual is talking about. But again, this is more rhetoric. If she really thought she was in danger, she would not be posting this video. Americans don't understand how actual oppression works. Let me show you how actual oppression works. Kyrie Irving said something about a certain group of people. And he didn't even say anything about that certain group of people. He watched a video on Amazon and recommended people watch it. He got excoriated. And he got labeled an anti-Semite and this and that and this and that. How many black people stood up and defended the homie? Zero. Shannon Sharp showed up with his hat in his hand like, I don't agree with this. It's horrible. Stephen A. Kyrie should retire. He should retire. He should retire? Yep, that's what they said. Kyrie should retire. All that shit happened under the Biden administration. So the danger that my children, my black boys are in, has not increased because Trump is the president of the United States.
And part of Trump's strategy appears to be to have a new wave of awful things every single day so that we get overwhelmed and freeze up or burn out. And I worry that what's happening to trans people is going to get lost amid the circus of things like the Indiana Jones bad guy salute and trying to make Canada the 51st state. In many ways, this is going to be a follow-up to the video I made about trans genocide.
Here we go. I cannot tell you how much I loathe this term. Send me an email, vintagestory@gmail.com. I'll send you a nice 3-minute video of what genocide actually fucking looks like. It's not cute, it's not a joke, and it's not some rhetorical device you can use to now piggyback off of actual real oppression. Stop it. A genocide is what's happening to our Gazan friends. A genocide is what happens when you're so totally fucked up and your entire living space is so ruined that a man can blatantly stand up in front of everybody and say, look, your place is completely fucked up and these people still want to take your shit, so why don't you guys all just go somewhere else, okay? And then we'll take it over and then everybody will have peace. When that is happening to the trans community, I will then say a genocide is happening. That is not happening in this country. We're nowhere close to that. You guys are not even dealing with black people had to deal with in the 60s. But you never heard Martin running around talking about, this is genocide. You didn't hear Malcolm talking about, this is genocide. Genocide is a real specific thing. It's a real specific thing. And the nerve of this individual to invoke this term when there was a newspaper clip about Gaza that she didn't even talk about, because remember the Gaza thing, I'll show you guys again. Look at it again. Oh, watch.
That we are held in. I know we are all in danger, but I can't cover all of it. And exponentially,
you can't cover it, so you're going to cover the 1% of the population where this would be applicable to. There's probably more Palestinian people in America than trans people. But you can't cover everything, but you're going to cover this one.
But I can't be silent today. Finally, before we get too far into this, I don't want anyone to think that my talking about trans issues is implying that the stomping on trans rights is the only or even the biggest problem that's going on right now. It's what I'm going to focus on, but yeah. Right now, everything is getting worse for anyone who isn't worth at least $100 million. And that harm is exponentially worse for marginalized groups, be they immigrants, people of color, people with disabilities, on and on and on and on. And the fact that Trump and his cronies shout DEI over literally everything, with the right's current use of DEI being probably the most unsubtle dog whistle yet for literally anyone who isn't straight, white, male, cisgender, non-disabled, and ideally Christian. It shows the utter contempt for all of us that we are held in. I know we are all in danger, but I can't cover all of it. And part of Trump's strategy appears to be to have a new wave of awful things every single day so that we get overwhelmed.
See, look, this is as much as the Gazans got in this discussion. She was duty bound by her conscience to talk about something that affects less than 1% of the country. Simultaneous to that, the Gazans get a little clip. But, you know, there's so much tragedy in the world, we can't cover it all. But don't you think the Gazans are actually the ones, like, in real trouble? Shouldn't we all be talking about them? Especially considering our government is funding a lot of this stuff. I don't know. I feel like if somebody can get me the Council of Geeks 1 video on the Gaza situation, that would be very helpful. We continue.
Freeze up or burn out.
By the way, this has been a constant accusation against the trans community, is that y'all are also have narcissistic personality disorder traits. And I don't think it is fair to diagnose a whole group of people because of what a very small group of people on the internet do. What we do on this platform and the kinds of personality types that that including myself, that becomes successful on this platform does not comport to being overly and totally factual, but it gives you a bunch of influence that you normally should not have, right? Because before you had to prove why we should listen to you. Now it's your personality quirks, all the rest of it, and people are going to listen to you and very rare fact checking, all the rest of it. We continue.
And I worry that what's happening to trans people is going to get lost amid the circus of things like the Indiana Jones bad guy salute and trying to make Canada the 51st state. In many ways, this is going to be a follow-up to the video I made about trans genocide 2 years ago. I'm not going to reiterate too much of that because it's not really out of date. The specific laws and policies that I cited are a bit older now, but just realize that since then, much worse ones have come along, so go ahead and check that video if you need to, and then realize things are several measures of magnitude worse than when I made that.
Measures of
now
magnitude
as then
worse. Imagine you are 15, 16 years old, and this is what one of your elders are telling you. I made a video about genocide 2 years ago. The only thing she should have said was, I should never have used that word because we saw what an actual genocide looks like with the Palestinians and the Israelis. This is what she should have said. But nope. What she did say was, I'm going to use the term and I'm going to tell my young audience it's worse. And you want to blame straight parents for why these kids are jumping off bridges. Interesting.
I cannot even begin to be comprehensive about this, even narrowing it down to what's happening to trans people. But I can highlight some specifics and try to get more people aware of what it is that's going on. So, some highlights of what Trump has ordered in the last month or so. The removal of any recognition within the federal government that there are more than two sexes or genders, and the insistence that it is an unchangeable feature of a person. Now, I know some folks made fun of this one because the wording of sex being assigned at conception technically defines everyone as a woman because male characteristics don't develop until sometime after that, but forgive me for not finding a technical error in a document erasing the validity of my identity to be particularly funny or comforting.
It really surprises me that there isn't somebody on that side that hasn't read a little bit more into that. Dear listener, we just had the Dobbs decision 2 years ago. We have the House and the Senate. Right? If I'm a right winger, we got the House and the Senate. Obviously, we have the executive branch, and obviously, we have the Supreme Court. Right? The cornerstone to the pro-life cause is that life begins at conception. If you have an unchallenged, and you really can't challenge it because it's science, if you have an unchallenged definition of human person from the moment of conception, that then can be used when abortion comes up at the Supreme Court level. We could say, hey, we have already established that a human being is a human being from the moment of conception. I mean, hell, we've assigned sex traits to them. So the fact that the leftists can't figure out what's going on with that is beyond me. As I said, these people, Project 25, Peter Thiel, Douglas Wilson, nobody knows about Douglas Wilson, but Douglas Wilson is really the power behind a lot of this stuff. I might do an expose with Douglas Wilson. I'm not sure. But it's mind-boggling to me that they can't see what the setup is here. This is about abortion. The reason they're phrasing it that way is, I'm telling you, watch. It's going to come up in about a year and a half. Watch.
The intent with this order has been pushed so far that federal workers have been told to remove pronouns from email signatures, even though that's straightforwardly a practical matter, because even disregarding trans issues, some names like Alex or Taylor could belong to either a man or a woman, and it might help to know that.
Yeah, but that's been a thing for decades since the inception of the country, and everybody's been able to hang out just fine. I think the I think the pronoun thing is a strange thing to me. It looks to me like, well, it's not strange in the sense that initially it was kind of like, this is what they want to be called. Why can't you just be respectful? Right? And then it metastasized into Dylan Mulvaney saying it should be a crime to misgender somebody. So when you say stuff like that, and you're popular on Twitter or whatever, or X or whatever, the pendulum is going to swing this way. And there's nobody mediating at the situation. So if you win, then you get to impose yourself on people and put out a bunch of executive orders. If you lose, then you have to eat all this stuff and work at different kinds of strategies because you're not going to be able to do it from the executive on down. We continue.
This same executive order includes the removal of any gender-affirming health care granted to inmates, effectively forcibly detransitioning anyone in the prison system who is on a hormone regimen, a physically traumatic forced change to their bodies that should fit comfortably under any definition of cruel and unusual punishment. This same order also...
Okay, so this is the whole Kamala spent money on trans surgeries and shit in jail. I understand a Republican or whatever saying, I'm not going to take my hard-earned money and put it in some sick doctor who's going to destroy children and whatever. I'm not doing that. I understand that. I understand that position. But we already spend money on making sure that inmates can remain healthy for mental health reasons. For example, we've got, we're subsidizing people's Prozac and all the rest of it. And I would say that jail is a horrific enough environment as it is already. Why do we need to take people who have been on this stuff? I mean, some of these people, especially if you're in prison, some of these people have been on this stuff for 10, 15, 20 years. What is the net positive in taking that from that person and then putting them in an environment where you have shanks and all these other stuff where people can really hurt each other? I don't think that is important to stop. I would rather you say we are not having any biological women sleeping in a confined area with biological men. We're not going to let that happen. So because there isn't that common sense approach, because you have people advocating for trans, there was a trans rapist. The dude, no. He raped somebody. Then he claimed he was trans and ended up in prison on the women's side, even though he had gone to prison for raping someone. And there is nothing that the trans apologist could say about it other than, well, he was one bad guy, da-da-da-da-da. And all the rest of us with daughters are like, what the fuck? This is what we're doing? Do you see how the extremity leads to another extremity? So now people in the government can't put their pronouns down? Like, why? Look, I think it's a stupid thing to do. I think the pronoun thing is I think the country's over it. This is evidenced by the fact that AOC put out that thing like, why didn't you vote for us? Why did you vote for me and Trump at the same time? And after she got done that little focus group, she took out the pronouns from her signature. I think that why? We were not doing this before. We continue.
Requires the rescinding of any documents or guidance.
At the same time, though, if a person wants to put their pronouns in an email, why are we wasting federal ink on that? Like, as long as they're doing a good job, whatever, who cares what you put Darth Vader on the fucking email signature? I don't care. Why do we care about that? But again, this is a zero-sum game. We have all the power now. We resent you for having all these weirdos in classes with our kids. We resent you for not being able to speak freely. You would sick the Twitter mob on us every time we said anything against you. You'd get a shutdown on Facebook. My son's in trouble because he goes to a public school and he says men are men and women are women. So you got all of this like deep-seated invective happening. So now when Trump says, yeah, you can't even put they, them or whatever, the people who are like libertarian and are like free speech, where are you? This is a free speech issue, no? These are not people that are saying fire in a crowded room or something like that. These are politicians who were voted in by the populace. I am sure when they were running, they were saying he, him, they, them, whatever. Why do we need to get them to delete the email? Why? AOC did that by herself. I think if a lot of these people went to engage the actual electorate, now some of these people, AOC is a politician. Some of these people are not. They're scientists, they're doctors, they're, you know what I'm saying? But how could that possibly be harmful and damaging if somebody voluntarily puts their gender identity marker on an email? But this is what I'm talking about. It's this extremism.
Supporting or affirming the trans community in any way, including such works as supporting intersex students, a resource for students' families, anyone in the prison system who is on a hormone regimen, a physically traumatic forced change to their bodies that should fit comfortably under any definition of cruel and unusual punishment.
I agree.
This same order also requires the rescinding of any documents or guidance supporting or affirming the trans community in any way, including...
Why? Again, can't we operate with a little bit of nuance? Anything supporting the trans community? Look, it's widely known that there are comorbidities with transgenderism, suicide, autism, etc. There's a million things, and I'm sure a bunch of them I don't know, that does make it pertinent and relevant for them to get support. And now we're saying we're not going to support you at all? And these are governmental positions, so these are all grown people. Like, what are we doing? Why does it have to get that extreme?
Which works as supporting intersex students, a resource for students, families, and educators. U.S. Department of Education Toolkit, creating inclusive and non-discriminatory school environments for LGBTQI+ students, and confronting anti-LGBTQI+ harassment in schools, a resource for students and families. Obviously, those are harmful documents.
Well, the one for school is probably a harmful document, because I've seen kids get suspended, expelled, and you're trying to get into Harvard, you're trying to get into Yale, and you got that on your jacket. It's over with. So I do think that's an issue. I just think that Mr. Trump should have deployed maybe some more centrist folks for that project and said, okay, you guys get the trans stuff. We got to find a way to get the best mediating position possible. You guys figure out the trans stuff and then report back to me. But that's obviously not what he did. He just went, rah! Like, nothing on the email signature. Nothing to support these kids. We're not even going to talk about what support means. Like, what's the definition of support? What do we mean? Is the support, I want to jump off a bridge because I believe that my mind and my body are mismatched? What does support look like there? You're at the top of the building in high school and the kid says, I'm jumping, I'm over it. What does support look like there? Do we want to cancel that support too? You don't think that there's a correlation maybe between support and these kids making it through? Don't get that.
This same order forbids the changing of gender markers on federal documents such as passports and requires that any that have been changed be reset. We will come back to this one. There's been an order to end.
I gotta tell you, there's this trans dude named Ty Turner. I think it's the most recent video that he posted. He said, he just said, look, as a trans person, here's how some of these laws are affecting me. He talked about being, every year there's this ritual where he goes to celebrate the birthday of his niece. And his niece is in Canada. And so he's sharing how he just can't come this year because of what she just said. Protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation. That's not what, but he was talking about the passport thing. He was worried that if he tried to get back into the country that his passport would be revoked or whatever. I've seen a bunch of other, kind of freakouts, but this one was a real logical one. It's like, well, if I get, will I be able to pass the border? The guy is probably going to be friendly. The Canadian guy, like, to get into the border is probably going to be friendly. He understands the situation we're in. But going back in the American side is going to be a problem. So he just he's like, I can't risk it right now. I can't be one of those people that falls through the cracks or whatever, or nobody sees me again. And so this year he's not going to his niece's birthday, and it was pretty terrible because he showed there was like this house or whatever that the kid really wanted, and now, you know, just not going to get it for her birthday because, look, man, that's no joke. I was in a situation one time where, you know, I had to do a lot of talking, you know, to get back, like to set things up properly for me to, you know, but I was also extremely trained, like real life scenarios on those situations. I was able to get back into the country, but you know, regular Joe Schmo, like what? Like that's scary. How am I going to get back in? You know, like that's terrifying. And it's like, I don't understand, Mr. Trump. Like, these people have been existing in this country as this identity. I don't have a problem with you saying going forward, there's going to be no more of this, you know, foo-foo shit. But all the other ones will just let you be grandfathered in. Everybody that did it before will grandfather you. Why can't you do that? Again, these people are 1% of the population. So it's not like there would be we would all be making a bunch of concessions here. So this to me is like, anytime I see something unnecessarily restrictive or whatever, I'm kind of like, man, this is just cruelty. It's not just we're gonna make a law to keep our kids safe and all the rest of it, but there does seem to be a little bit of fuck you in there. It just does feel like that, and it's like, that's great. You want to own the libs, you want to see people cry, it's cool. I mean, you probably should see a counselor. I'm not being funny. But like, these people have been living like this. Our country was permissive of this. And now out of nowhere, you show up, you sign a document, and now they can't go visit. Why? Has there ever been a terrorist attack where a trans person does something? Well, we know there has been a terrorist attack, but it had nothing to do with their passport. We got a problem with I don't know if the intelligence community has alerted us to a problem of all these trans people traveling and shit that should, you know, they're getting into the country with bad gender assignment whatever things on their passports and wreaking havoc all over the country. Like, is that there? I don't think it's there. I think you could say going forward we're not going to do this anymore. But the people that have already, and again, like, say what you want, but they've been socialized this way. They've been able to do this, and then all of a sudden now they gotta have to do something else. Like, why don't we just grandfather these people in? These people have demonstrated, the entire community has demonstrated, like, yo, we can go to and from. We haven't compromised national security. There has never been an international incident relative to a trans person disrespecting somebody else's country. So what are we doing here? Why can't we just say, okay, going forward X, but all the rest of you guys did this. Why? We're going to honor it, respect it, whatever. Why? Now, of course, when you see something like this is a topic I was brushing off like this is ridiculous. The Obergefell decision or gay marriage could be at stake. And at first I was like, yeah, you guys are crazy, la la la, but I don't know. Because when you see stuff like this, it's like, we didn't need to go there, but you went there, Mr. Trump, so where would it stop? And the other thing is, I'm not sure. I do think, like, the sports thing is a real Trump thing. But the IDs and the federal government thing, I don't believe that Trump feels that in his heart. I think that this is more Project 25, Peter Thiel type shit than what he truly believes. But either way, I don't care. You're the president. Like, overrule that shit and put in some conciliatory language. Like, you're changing the entire reality of these people with the stroke of a pen, and you're not giving any sort of runway so that these people can adapt and adjust. I think that's terrible. I think there should be a, you know, whatever, 3 or 4 or 5 year moratorium or whatever, but something. But you can't just, oh, that's gone. There's like no, like, just gonna tear the Band-Aid right off. And that's okay if there's scar tissue that's built underneath that Band-Aid and those platelets are working well, no problem. But a lot of these trans people, they're not scabbed, they're currently bleeding. And this is not helping them. Now, look, again, I'm not going to say we need to hold the entire country hostage to the emotional issues of 1%. We don't need to do that, but we don't need to ignore it either. You cannot say you love your country if you're not concerned for every single person in your country, right? And this is why I'm like, I'm not even looking for a balance. I'm looking for some sort of thing that says we still love these people. Or they're still us. I'm not seeing that in these. You see what I'm saying?
Any and all federal support for trans-supportive health care of any kind to anyone under the age of 19. And yeah,
I got to tell you, the 19 thing is the dumbest thing in the world. Now, 26 would have made more sense because essentially the decision-making mechanism in your brain as far as what's good, what's bad, impulse control, etc., is not fully developed till you're 26, right? And so some people have suggested pushing up there. Me personally, I'm sorry. If you could take a rifle and aim it at somebody and put a bullet in their head, and the U.S. government trusts you and in some cases requires you to do that, it is impossible for me to support, oh, we got to wait till 19 or 26 or whatever for these people. If you can kill someone legally in the U.S., you should be able to trans your body, okay? That's just common sense, okay? Like, this is insane.
this would include anyone at the age of 18 who are adults under the law. It's worth stressing that this does not ban procedures or medications, strictly speaking, as nearly all gender-affirming care and medications have multiple uses and are distributed without issue for care for other conditions as well as gender-related ones. For example, I'm on spironolactone as a testosterone blocker. It's also frequently prescribed to treat high blood pressure and prevent heart failure. So what is being banned is not the medicine, strictly speaking, because by and large, the medicine is effective and safe. Mm-hmm. But very specifically, the use of these things in gender-affirming care. And naturally, on the day that I'm recording this, there is word of a coming order to ban trans athletes, specifically from women's sports in schools and colleges. In an executive order aimed at overhauling the military, there was naturally targeting of trans.
Well, obviously, the sports thing. The sports thing was where I really kind of looked at my wife and said, they're finished. I have no idea why the trans community made that such an issue. It made you so open to vulnerabilities. And then they said things like, these dudes don't even care about women's sports. They mock women's sports all the time. I agree. The problem is, we're not thinking demographically. Let's think this through for a second. Which demographic in America would be the most concerned that a volleyball player is obviously female and has a ridiculous advantage over the other girls on the game? Do you think it's men that drive their daughters to soccer or volleyball? You think it's men? I've got a friend, his daughter's going to the WNBA. I'm dead ass serious. She's going to the WNBA. And I saw her grow up on Facebook. And every single day he posts how much points she made, everything. Like, he is the proudest father of all time. And he developed this girl, and she's incredible. She's incredible. But he's an exception. Most of the time, the person that's driving the daughter to lacrosse is the mom. Right? It's the mom. So when they hear the true story of a girl who was on the way to a scholarship for volleyball. But then a 6'2", 195 trans woman spiked the ball so hard that it knocked her unconscious, gave her TBI, and paralyzed her on the left side of her body to the point where she could no longer play volleyball, especially at a D1 collegiate level. Who do you think is more affected by that? You guys should have dropped the sports issue immediately. The minute that you guys saw that video with Leah Thomas, where Leah Thomas was dusting these girls by 30 seconds, the minute you guys saw that video, you guys should have said, okay, we gotta abandon ship. Abandon ship right now. But this is again what I'm talking about relative to, you know, privilege and male privilege and white privilege. It's 2025. Black people still haven't gotten reparations. We're supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. The Jewish folks over there in Europe, they tried to come over here, it didn't happen. They got, you know, the Germans gave them reparation. The English gave the Jewish people reparations. We put a bunch of Asian Americans in concentration camps during World War II. They got reparations. They got reparations. But black people who generated $1.8 trillion, comparatively speaking, we got nothing. Malcolm and Martin did not run on reparations. They did not emphasize reparations because black people understand that we're going to have to fight and fight and fight to just operate in the world, and we're not going to get everything we want. And there's certain things that have so much cultural unpopularity that if we run on it, it's going to destroy the things where we are starting to change people's minds. See, the negotiation, the compromise, that kind of mindset, they don't have, because this is the first time that demographic, I'm specifically talking about biologically white males, it's the first time that they've had to negotiate instead of impose. They're imposing this. That's a really big ask to ask that 36-year-old soccer mom to put her daughter's life in danger or her career in danger for you. You should have known. These white women vote a lot, and they're heavily invested in what goes on in the lives of their girls, right? This is a major mistake for the trans community. You gave the people that hate you, and I'm saying it this way, young person, because we really don't. Nobody hates y'all. You're not hated more than hated people are hated in this country, okay? I know that these people are trying to make it sound like everybody in the world hates you. It's not true. It's not true. When I first came to this country, I was introduced to the term nigger. And I came home and I said, Mom, what's a nigger? She said, oh, that's just what white boys say when they're afraid of you. She said, but the next time they say some shit like that, they'll light them up, though. So I showed up at school the next day. You know, the scripture says, honor your father and mother. I said, what'd you say to me that day? He said, I called you a nigger. I said, bah, 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 bah. You got to honor your father and mother, man. As the Bible says, she commanded me to do, I had to. But what my mother didn't tell me was that the country was full of white people who hated me, and they all thought I was beneath them. But she didn't say that. She just said those people are scared of you. So that's what they don't do. But, you know, don't let it bother you. Just keep it moving. Thank God for my mother. If I had some people like y'all, I don't know if I would have made it. This is the ultimate irony about this whole community, is that I think a lot of the suicides that are happening among kids are the fault of people like this. When you are young, when you're a teenager, when you're coming into the world, when you're coming into adulthood, you believe everybody's against you. You believe everybody hates you. You believe that the embarrassing thing that happened to you is never going to leave you, blah, 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 blah. And what's supposed to happen is your elders, the guidance counselor, the teacher, the parent, they're all supposed to surround you and say, yup, that happened to me. This is my crazy story. This is my embarrassing story. This is my discrimination story. This is whatever. It was horrible, but you know, there's more people that love us and hate us and da-da-da-da. And this is what black people have constantly heard over and over again. our leaders would come around and say, hell no, like we're gonna make it, we're gonna be good, blah blah blah, we're gonna resist, we're gonna do it the right way, yada yada yada. Every teenager feels that way. The difference is there's only one demographic right now who shows up into the guidance counselor's office and says, everybody in the world hates me, I should kill myself. There's only one demographic that doesn't get comforted, and that's these trans kids. These adults start agreeing with them and putting these thoughts into their heads that if the 6'2", 190 guy can't be on the fucking volleyball team, that means people want a trans genocide. Ridiculous. Dangerous.
Service members. It is not technically an outright ban of them from the military. However, it does set the stage for that, stating a member of the military being transgender, quote, conflicts with a soldier's commitment to an honorable, truthful, and disciplined lifestyle, even in one's personal life. The clear implication being that being transgender at all is dishonorable and untruthful by.
I think this is probably a little worse than what she's saying. She's taking honorable in the conventional sense, like you're an honorable person, I'm an honorable person. But remember, in the military, what happens to you afterward depends on what kind of discharge is notated on your DD-214, right? If you had an honorable discharge, cool, then you get XYZ thing, right? If you have a dishonorable discharge, that has real practical ramifications. I mean, imagine you're applying for a job. Let's say you're applying for a security firm, right? And you're going to be handling weapons, and they find out you did military service, and they open up that DD-214, and your discharge status is dishonorable. That is going to affect the employment decision. For sure. We had a dude. I'm going to talk about that. Being honorably or dishonorably discharged is a thing. It's very, very, very important. So, again, this is the stuff that, and look, maybe the community is not familiar with the military and things like that. But this language, you guys got to understand, like, because there's a whole, like, oh, Trump is an idiot thing, blah, 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 that again, these people are lying to you. Trump is a very intelligent man, but what's worse is that his advisors are extremely intelligent. And his advisors are extremely purposeful in all the words that they use. When they talk about the conception of a male at the beginning of the they don't care about the trans thing because they're just going to win with an executive order. They're putting the term conception in there because they're going after abortion. Bless God. So when they put honorable in there, what they're saying is, if you go out and flaunt all this trans shit, we're going to dishonorably discharge you, and that's going to fuck up your DD-214. It's going to, on the emotional level, basically you've got this scarlet letter pinned on you that you're dishonorable, even though you signed a contract with this country to lay down your life, or even worse, take another person's life on behalf of this country. So I got people that are willing to do that, and now we're going to dishonorably discharge them because of this shit. Even though we told them as a country, oh yeah, we're cool with this, blah, 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 blah. But again, there's no grace period. There's no transitional period. There's no now. Otherwise, you're going to be dishonorably discharged. Not cool, man. This, again, it's just pure cruelty. It's just reactionary, angry, vengeful cruelty. This has nothing to do with national security. Okay? There are less than 1% of the population is trans, and then less than 1%, I think, of Americans go into the military. So, with like 7 of them, we need to put language in there for this kind of legislation for 7, 8, 9 people? Okay. Ridiculous.
Nature. And that those identifying as trans, quote, cannot satisfy the rigorous standards necessary for military service. Now, at present, most of what's happening, and not just to trans folks, is happening through executive orders. These are effectively memos from the Office of the President.
If you have gender dysphoria, because here's the thing, guys. Before you go to MEPS, They ask you if you've ever had any mental illness episodes, whatever, and the recruiter tells you to lie and all the rest of it as you go to the hotel. Yeah. But basically, like when you sign up and you're serious, you're gonna go. You go to the Gold Maps, and it basically all the admin stuff for you to go, and then there's a cursory background check, okay? And the military does discriminate relative to mental illness unless you get some sort of waiver or there's an access program they want you to be a part of or whatever, and they look the other way for certain things. But in the main, like those are the conversations that happen at the MEPS level, and I don't have a problem with them saying trans people have gender dysphoria. That's a mental malady, so that's going to be on there with the military. If you're paranoid schizophrenic, you're not going in the military. If you have bipolar disorder, they're not going to take you. It's just so they have these psychiatric conditions. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is you already let these people in. You already let them, go to the barracks with whoever they assign. I mean, I honestly don't know. But my point is, why can't we have the people that have that and say, going forward, we're going to do X, Y, Z? Or let's do a 3-month period or something where we're changing a policy. But this policy's been around. I don't know how long it's been around. I don't know. But they're socialized. They have expectations, yada, yada, yada. And now we spring this on them because you signed a paper. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, there's better ways of handling this stuff. There's so many better ways of handling this stuff, and there's so few people who volunteer for the military. Especially in a world with Ukraine, with Russia, with the Israelis massacring people. For anybody that signs up for the U.S. military during this period when we're saber-rattling Iran, saber-rattling China, that's a person that's committed to this country. There ought to be some deference for a person like that, instead of just a giant middle finger. And now we're gonna unleash. Anyway, we continue.
Some of which result in immediate action in the areas he has direct jurisdiction over. Some of which are massive overreaches of power that are already being challenged in the courts, which will at least delay their implementation. We've already seen this in action as his attempt to revoke the constitutional guarantee of birthright citizenship is
insane,
currently being blocked by the courts. Not to be a downer on this, but the courts stepping in should not be taken as a mark of comfort. The current Supreme Court, where much of this will ultimately end up, has already shown its willingness to throw out decade-old statutes in favor of far, far more conservative ones in direct conflict to the previous norms. So,
give me an example. They didn't replace the Roe v. Wade decision with anything. They just sent it back to the states. So you get 50% on this, but I mean, you see what she's saying, and there's some validity there. I mean, they've got this is the first time, because I remember when Bush won in, I want to say 12, or was it 8? I think it was, it's 2004 when he ran again. He beat John Kerry. Okay, we continue.
While the court process will slow things down, we should at least be preparing for every single executive order he's signing, be they about trans folks or anything else, to ultimately be upheld by the Supreme Court, even though some like...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Bush had he had the House and the Senate, and obviously had the executive branch. And, he's always been criticized by the pro-life community because you had the numbers, you had everything, and you didn't do it. This time, not only does he have the House and the Senate, but, I mean, for all intents and purposes, dear listener, he also has the Supreme Court, right? And I'm not saying that as a Republican. I'm saying specifically him. Pretty sure, there's 3 people that are occupying those chairs right now because he put them there. Now, granted, Amy Coney Barrett has voted against him in certain areas that are surprising. But I think a lot of that is she's holding the big ball behind her back, which obviously is going to be abortion in the next, 18 to 20 months, I think.
Won't be. But let's get into the practical outcomes. And we'll start by circling back onto the issue of passports. Many trans people who've been trying to get updates to their passports done before something like this happened are now reporting their passports are being held up. Now, I need you to understand that when you seek to get your passport changed in any way or renew it any earlier than a year out from its expiration date, you have to submit your current passport before they will send you a new one. With the State Department currently blocking these changes to passports, that means there are a significant number of trans people who effectively cannot leave the country. I will repeat that. For as long as updating passports is blocked and until the original passports are returned, if ever, there are trans people who likely were actively seeking the ability to safely leave the United States should it become necessary. Their passports have been effectively confiscated, removing their ability.
Yeah, but I mean, if you left, you wouldn't be able to come back. But I mean, you won't even be able to get out of the country, though. Yeah, I mean, you trap these people in here, essentially. I mean, I know the response. The response is no, just reapply, get one that says your actual sex, and then have that, and then go to Canada, and then change again. All these people that talk about how they're going to leave America, I don't believe it. I don't believe anybody's going to really leave America. The only trans people that are going to leave America are people that are in the upper 1%, 1%, and none of this shit affects them anyway. But like I said, Ty Turner, I mean, there was a real world issue there. There was a real family issue there. And then how do you explain, just for those of you who didn't hear, Ty Turner is a trans man. Every year he has this ritual. He goes to Canada and gives his niece some present. I think it's Legos or something. Or his niece is like in love with Legos. And this year, for the first time, he's not going because of this specific issue. Because he doesn't know whether or not he can go back into the country. And so it's like, how do you explain to his 6-year-old niece that he's not going to show up? They talk on the phone every day. He says he's got a surprise for her. She says, I can't wait to see you, blah, 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 blah. How do you explain to her you're not going to see him this year? And again, there are solutions like, oh, well, they can come from Canada here and visit. I get it. But again, like, these people are going to slip through the cracks. It's going to be very, very difficult. Why can't we have a grace period when we're transferring from one to the other? But again, like, to me, it's either like you're just rubber stamping shit, you're not thinking through the ramifications of what you're doing, or worse, you are, and you're like, let's be as cruel as we possibly can to these folks.
To leave for any reason, including their own safety. In the same vein, the State Department's page on international travel has removed the previous LGBTQI+ designation and replaced it with LGB, literally erasing the identities of trans, queer, and intersex people. The word trans no longer appears on the site at all, and if you search for it, you'll be asked if you meant to search for trains. Lest you think it somewhat petty for me to focus on the changing of labels for trains. Lest you think it somewhat petty for me to focus on the changing of labels on a website, particularly in the face of the effective passport confiscation, it is important. Because it is erasure in a very literal sense. The acknowledgement of our existence is being erased and discussion of us is being removed. Inside Medicine was able to obtain an email sent to the CDC.
I disagree with that. This is another one of those things where a young person is gonna read this as something vastly different. Dear young person and dear Council of Geeks person, do you think that was on the State Department website in 2004? Were trans people erased in 2004? We had no trans people in America in 2004? The Canadian people, they say LGBTQIA2S. I think the 2S means two-spirited because there's an indigenous population there. And so you guys heard about the whole, that's a myth, by the way, but we'll go with it for now. The whole two-spirit thing, right? It's a Native American tradition or an indigenous Canadian tradition that they did have trans people. They just called them two-spirited. Whatever you want to say, fine. But we don't say TS or 2S in our recitation of that alphabet, right? So does that mean that we're erasing those people? A lot of people say LGBT, but what happened to the Q and the IA, right? LGBTQIA, whatever, QI, whatever. Like, eventually you're going to have the entire alphabet. And can the two-spirited people say, oh, Canada is erasing us from existence? Ridiculous. Like, this is where this rhetoric gets really, really chippy for teenagers who, once again, are looking to you as a leader. And when you tell them a simple erasure of the term T is erasing you as a person, that's crazy. That's not true. We had trans people in this country long before we started with the LGBT, blah, 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 blah. Long before. And we'll have it long after. Okay? Young people need to understand that this is a relatively new phenomena. This is new. The LGBTQI, that's new. That's not like, but your whole life, I understand if you're a young person, your whole life, you just grew up with that. I get it. But there's billions of us that were alive before 2017, all right, or 2005 or whatever. And so, like, we know what America looked like before we talked all this stuff. And I got to tell you, it was much better for trans people back then. As I said, you know, Greenwich Village, which is kind of ground zero for that. I used to hang out with them dudes all the time. Everybody, we were free. You had the vamps over there. You had the trans people. You had everything. You had people, you know, I mean, it's literally ground zero of the Stonewall riots. Okay. So we didn't have, there was no quote trans representation back in the day when I was at school and when I was out there 14th Street. You know what they did? You know what they did? They didn't sit in their rooms and cry. They didn't jump off windows and say, people aren't, you know, people. You know what they did? They all found each other, started hanging out, and they took over for Greenwich Village. That's what they did. They did it by themselves. They formed their own communities. And after they stood up to the police in Stonewall, they were basically ceded that land basically as their property, essentially. And they've been there ever since. That's what happened. But this person wants you to believe that if the T gets deleted from a website, that they're erasing you as a person. No, they're not. That's untrue. That's a lie.
Requiring them to remove any reference to gender identity or transgender status from any and all scientific papers, regardless of the point of those. The exact wording considers the following to be forbidden terms: gender, transgender, pregnant person, pregnant people, LGBT, transsexual, non-binary, spelled two different ways, assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth, biological male and biological female. This is politicians dictating to scientists and doctors the words and terms they are forbidden from using. And yes, it does include the simple word gender as well as biological male and biological female, hampering researchers' abilities to clearly and accurately discuss even the most basic elements of research and patient care.
I mean, the outrage here is, I don't know. First of all, the point of language is to communicate. One of the more fascinating discussions I've seen in the trans community is, it was an internal discussion, and I'm not going to name the person because he's turned out to be a very disgusting, vile individual who tapes sex tapes and then distributes them all over the place. But I was sitting in on a discussion and we were talking about, look, what's the point of language? Language is designed to communicate. And so when you guys start adding all this extra shit in there, it creates a sort of lexicon that people who are at the medicinal level, like people in that community, people at the work, now I gotta mine through all this nonsense to diagnose this person. Men and women are not just different at the and I could tell you this. I am almost certain that there's been a contingency of medical professionals at the federal level that said, hey, you need to do this. You need to do this so that we can actually streamline some of this shit, because I got to go through all these kind of weird whatever to ascertain what I'm doing. Men and women are different even at the cellular level. Our cells behave differently. So the hampering has been done by you guys introducing language that should have been automatic because of evolution or God, however you want to say. The distinctions that we're able to perceive are there to promote life and protect life, right? But I think what actually happened was the doctors went to Trump and say, "Hey, do this so that if somebody's got cancer and I'm trying to figure out the game plan, and I read them as a boy, and then all of a sudden it comes out they're a girl, I got to rehash it. We missed time. I need you to put that in there, and then I'm gonna come around and say, hey, I got to do this. It's Trump. He's a fascist. Blah 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 blah." That's what I think happened. That's what I think happened. But no, I don't. Give me one example of a doctor being hampered by understanding the actual genetics of the subject of his care. Like, just I'm open to it. Give it to me. Let's weigh it. We continue.
Anything that deviates even slightly from the limited scope of what Trump and his ghouls believe defines the sexes is being erased from the records. We are being unpersoned.
Love that. I hate it. You are not being unpersoned. Stop it. There is only one demographic in our country that are unpersoned, and that's babies in the womb. Now, you see all the anger here that this person has because they took they took a letter out of something in a medical journal on a federal website. You're not being unpersoned. I've had people tell me babies aren't persons. I've had people on this channel tell me babies aren't persons. There's only one demographic in the country that's being unpersoned. Those are babies. You are not being unpersoned. So all of this right here is probably, like, this kind of outrage is like the most annoying thing in the world to me. Yeah, it's so annoying to me. Ridiculous. You went through this country, and look, I'm just speaking the left wing perspective on white males, who this individual was until about 2 years ago. You went through this entire country with all the privileges and all the whatever. This is not genocide. This is you simply being offended. And white males in America are not used to being offended. They're used to saying all the offensive shit and talking down to people. And then when somebody fights them back, it's the end of the world. Here we go. You're this angry because you're being depersoned. No, you're not. So were you depersoned before 2018 or whatever, when all that language was, quote, updated in the lexicon? Were you not a person before that? Was RuPaul not a person before that? All the trans people in listen, go to Greenwich Village. Go to Greenwich Village and tell them that they were being depersoned. Please. Ridiculous. We continue.
And while it is true that we will remain trans and exist as trans people, regardless of whether we are allowed to be called that, this is an extremely dark turn.
It's not an extremely dark turn. And it's not a turn. It is a return. It's a return. This is how we ran the country, and we didn't have trans people jumping off bridges every 5 minutes. This is a challenge that I have to the trans community. And people that know me know I have numbers, so I already know the answer to the questions before I ask them. But think about this with me, trans person, especially a trans person in this age demographic. If what these people are saying is true, if we don't chemically intervene, if we don't do double mastectomies on 16-year-olds, if we don't, I'm not going that far. This is a dark turn in America. No, it's not. No, it's not. This is how America has been run. And if what you guys are saying is true, all of us who went to school in the 90s, please listen to what I have to say. This is a challenge to all trans people everywhere. Show me the data. Because according to y'all, if what this person is saying is right, all of us who were 90s kids in school should have example after example after example of kids who jumped off bridges and blew themselves away, whatever you want to say, because they were misgendered. Because that's what y'all are telling me. You are telling, and you're also telling parents. You're telling parents that if their kid who is trans kills themselves, it's most likely their fault. And then the parent goes, well, shit, I don't want my daughter to kill herself. And then, well, you better go in there and march them in there and get them that Lupron. Never mind the fact that we use Lupron to sterilize child molesters. We're now going to give it to your child. We're also going to pump your daughter up with a bunch of testosterone. What's the worst that could happen? Oh, we got these puberty blockers. That's what's going on. Dear trans person, puberty blockers are not this simple, reversible, whatever that these people are saying. And there are serious consequences like osteoporosis. There is a lowering of IQ points. All these things happen with, quote, gender-affirming care. So you're going to have to miss me with the faux outrage and all this other stuff. This is just you being told no. No. You're 1% of the population. We're not going to upend the definitions of terms and words and long-standing medical mores so that you can feel validated. And I have no sympathy for a person that does this because you are influencing children to jump off bridges. Here's the point. Dear young trans person who's an internet native, all you know is the internet. All of us went to school in the 90s, public school. There is nobody that has a memory of 18 kids jumping off of bridges because they're trans and nobody could help them. The suicide stuff has shot up exponentially once we started focusing on it. Society was cool. There's a lot of times when folks look the other way. Okay? So like, you got to understand that as a young trans person, this person is talking like this is some groundbreaking thing and some new thing in America. We already have the template. Less of them were dying when I was in school than when you're in school right now. Now there's a whole ton of them dying. And this is the reason why. The reason why you didn't see 18 suicides a year in your school. None of you could probably even name a bunch of suicides that you did. There's a whole bunch of you that have never had one in a public school. But you don't know any other kind of public school because you're so young. But I'm telling you, I went to school and it was all right. If you were that, you were that. It is what it is. It was what it was. And the suicide rate has jumped up exponentially for that demographic. And this is the reason why. This person right here is prototypical of why kids are doing this. Because they believe what they're saying. They're taking it literally. They're taking genocide literally. They're taking, if my mom won't gender me properly, she hates me. They're taking that literally. The people who are supposed to take you under the wind and say, hey, I was secretly gay. I was secretly trans. Oh, I felt like it was the end of the world. I was 16 years old. I was going to do some dumb shit. I was going to drive the car into the tree. My friend stopped me from doing it. Then I realized how dumb we were. We both laughed at each other and went and got some ice cream. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. This happens to everybody, and in 20 years, you're going to be sitting down across from some student and doing the exact same thing, because you're going to be here in 20 years. That is what your leaders are supposed to tell you. They're not supposed to tell you that if the government, who never had the T in there for the vast majority of our country, and then experimentally threw it in there about 7-8 years ago, and are going back to the way things were in the country, you don't tell them that this is a form of genocide and all the rest of it. What you could say is, maybe our strategy of being so aggressive about everything is not working, and maybe we should just sit down and be quiet and demonstrate by our lives that you shouldn't be afraid. But when I've got girls getting concussed and half paralyzed, when I've got dudes walking around with fully erect penises in a female locker room,
because if you deny the very existence of a person, it becomes, from your perspective, impossible for your actions to be seen as harming that kind of person.
And that's the reason you guys depersonalize babies. And that's the reason you when you're talking about life in general, 99.99% of the time you don't use Latin. But the minute it comes to a baby, you use the term fetus because people don't know that a fetus is simply another term for a baby. They think it's some other sort of ontology. And so you're able to depersonalize and dehumanize that child in the womb by calling it a fetus instead of a baby. So I'm very well aware with the tactic. I'm very well aware of it. But you don't, I don't know this person's position on abortion. I'm just saying, like, if we're logically consistent, that's what's going on.
They're not real, after all. To remove our acknowledgement is to remove our humanity, to create a world in which we either go back in the closet, something this administration and its backers know full well will result in a massive spike in self-harm and suicide, or if we don't go back into the closet, then we don't really even count.
There it is. So here's one of your leaders. You transitioned 2 years ago. Here's one of your leaders saying, this is going to result in suicides and blah, 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 blah. No, you are the reason they're doing that. When I was growing up, trans people must have had it way harder because nobody was transitioning. Nobody was doing the pronoun shit. No way. So all of us, if what you're saying is true, all of us should have dozens of stories of kids jumping off bridges. Listen to me, young trans person. We don't have one. We had girls in school that were masculine and could kick your ass in baseball before we all hit puberty, and we used to call those girls tomboys. And a lot of the tomboys grew up to be gay, okay? End up on the basketball team. Or they just hit puberty, and she's one thing one year, and then she comes back after she hits puberty, and now all of a sudden, like, we're not trying to go to the baseball field with Shorty. Right? We didn't have any of these labels, man. We didn't have any HRT. We didn't have none of this shit. If what these people are telling you is true, if you should cut yourself and kill yourself because they're taking a T off of a website, how the hell did trans people survive through the 90s? Think. I've never had anybody even attempt to answer that question. All of us should have not one, but multiple yearly stories of kids killing themselves over this shit. It didn't happen. The only variable is now you got people like this that are saying, everything's dark, everything is bad. Well, what happened? What'd they do to you? They took the letter T out of the LGBT on the website, and that means that we're no longer human and we're no longer here, and that we're not. First of all, people need to understand that trans is not an ontology. This is so important. What people are calling a trans person is it's a therapeutic. In other words, the person has gender dysphoria. Best example that I can give of authentic gender dysphoria, I have a very close friend, trans. And when she hit puberty, some of this stuff is subtle and catches up on. She saw herself in the mirror with the facial hair starting to come out and completely lost her mind because she was convinced that a stranger was staring back at her because her self-perception was always feminine. And so when puberty starts to hit and they're getting these secondary male characteristics, it really, really fucked her up. Bad. Okay? That is gender dysphoria. They're in a substrate of other maladies called, somatic maladies, basically some of your body. There are people that believe they should only have one arm. I can get you a video of a woman who believed that she should have been blind, and the direction given, the guidance given was in all somatic disorders, never judge the person for feeling the way they feel. Do not say that they're lying, but tell them that this is common, even though it's not common in the sense of times it's happened, but it is common in the sense of there are hundreds and thousands of people that can relate to you, and you're going to be able to overcome it. Most young people desist from transgenderism or gender confusion by the time they turn 17 and 18. If you still have that going on, there are going to be different options. But I promise you, things are going to be good. You're going to be fine. This is the only time in American history, and the only time in the various communities in this country where the elders are telling the young people to be alarmed and be crazy and all the rest of it, and not saying, y'all are young, you think everything's the end of the world, man, just sit down, be quiet, and play your PlayStation, hang out with your friends, you're going to be good, I promise. That is our role as adults. Do you really think, ma'am, that y'all got it anywhere near as bad as black people? Do you understand that black people, since they were children, have images of their archetypes being massacred on live TV? And then the people that did it get off without an indictment? And then they open up GoFundMe accounts and they get hundreds of thousands of dollars for killing a black kid? Y'all grew up like that? The fuck are you talking about? You guys got a national, a complete communal story of rape like African people did who showed up in this country? I'm not saying we suffered more than you. Of course we did, but that's not the angle. The angle is, how did we survive then? How are we not jumping off buildings? I got names since I was a child. The LA riots started the day after my birthday. I was eating cereal watching Rodney King get the shit kicked out of him. And then I was eating cereal watching these people get off for doing that shit. I was in New York City when they killed Amadou Diallo, shot at him 41 times. I was there with Abdul Louima. Abner Louima. I'm not going to talk about what they did to him. We grew up with this. We didn't hear stories. These were national conversations. And then we got to see all the pure whatever white people talking about how it really wasn't that bad and people need to follow the law and blah, 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 blah. Every time one of us dies, that happens. So my question to you is, well, how come we're not jumping off bridges like that then? How come? You got to figure that out. You know, I did a Grok suicide demographic thing, and we're like they broke it down. Asians, if they come to America, never do it. If they stay in an Asiatic country, it's sky high. But with Asians that come to America, their suicide rates are extremely low, so they're the lowest. But they had us third, and then they had white folks were at the top. So we should be at the top. Our kids should be at the top. How come? You know why? Because when we see that shit happen, when I saw Rodney King happen, my mom told me, now you see all that's happening on the camera? I said, yeah. I said, okay. I said, those guys going to jail for a while. My mother said, they're not going to go to jail, baby. I said, what are you talking about? Of course they're going to jail. She said, they're not going to jail. Let me ask you a question, ma'am. Do you believe that there could ever be a picture of 4 dudes on top of a trans person with batons and beating them to an inch of their life? You think that a video like that could cycle in America and the people that did that to that person would be found not guilty? Get me one example where that's happened. Give me one example where a trans person has been ensconced and attacked and beaten, almost killed, and there's clear evidence on camera and nothing happens to them. I had a friend, he was talking to me about Kanye West, and he said, imagine if everywhere you go, there's a Kanye West billboard or whatever. Imagine if you went to pay for your pizza and Kanye West was on the dollar. He said, how would you feel if you were Jewish? Now, this person is not from America. So he's asking me this question. So I began to explain to him Andrew Jackson. And I began to explain how ruthless Andrew Jackson was with his slaves. Then I said, here he is. He said, what? I said, there he is. He's on our currency. He was blown away. He said, how the fuck could you guys, how? We got people that raped our women on the fucking dollar bill. So all this shit right here, I get so angry at these people. Not because I'm going to win the Oppression Olympics, but because the encouragement that we received from our elders was that we were going to make it, that we were good, that the arc of justice, all that stuff, and it's going to be our turn to go out and push it forward, and one day we're gonna come through and all the rest of it. There was not this, oh my God, you don't think that if black adults wanted to fill black children with a bunch of nihilistic despair that they could have? The role of our elders, they understood the assignment. Yes, you're a minority. People are sinners. Bad things are going to happen when you combine those two. Anytime you combine sin with power, there's going to be a problem. But there's a God in heaven. We can work together. We're going to do this. We're going to be brothers with each other. You had this movement in the 90s where Minister Farrakhan was at the height and black people started calling each other brother and sister and all that stuff. We started rocking shirts that said it's a black thing. You wouldn't understand. We were doing the shiki stuff, cross colors, all types of shit. We're in our community. Our elders stood us up like grown men and women. So miss me with the faux drama. Oh, we were being unpersoned. No, Dred Scott was unpersoned. Yeah, the only demographic in this country that was unpersoned are babies and black people. Y'all were never depersonalized. There was no Supreme Court that said anything about you being three-fifths fucking human. Stop this. I don't care about you personally complaining and whining and bitching. You're a privileged individual whose privilege is being taken away from you. Fine. But do not fill the minds of children and young people with this nonsense. Let them know. There was like this before, and there wasn't some giant pogrom against trans fucking people back then. And there wasn't a slew of kids jumping off buildings back then. But trans people were around back then. The only variable now is y'all. You guys are the only variable. If you guys would have been around, if our leaders would have been like this woman, none of us would have been here. Because we don't have imaginary issues. The shit is on. I can get you names. I can get you videos. I can show you. Y'all did not grow up like that. Stop it. You're killing these kids. You understand that you're full of shit and this is just rhetorical devices. But the people watching you are taking it literally.
As people. If what we are is named, then we are real. And if we are real, then we have rights. Erase all references to us. Now you don't even have to worry about the optics of crushing our rights.
Ridiculous. We didn't have all this language in the nomenclature, and nobody was coming after y'all. Show me the evidence. Get me the videos. Because I can show you videos. I can show you Supreme Court documents. I could show you the Federalist Papers where they say Negroes are to be accounted as property and not as persons. I can show you that shit. It's not rhetorical nothing. It's there. Show me. Show me y'all being treated like that. You have gender dysphoria. The recommended therapeutic for gender dysphoria at the time was to affirm the person in the sex that they were born in because it's impossible to change their sex. That was it, a DSM all the way till DSM-4. And then the guidance changed for political reasons to we're going to affirm them in the gender that they think is in their mind. There's a mental somatic disorder, or there's a mental somatic incongruity, and so instead of saying we're going to go with the soma because we've got the body, we've got scientific and demonstrable evidence that you're X or YZ, we flipped it and said, okay, we're going to let the mind dominate what's going on with the bodily reality. And that change is the guidance for medical professionals. So then when medical professionals started affirming those people, that's where the term transgender comes in. Transgender is not an ontology. It is not this is what I am at the core of my being. Transgenderism is a medical therapeutic. This is so important to understand. I'm a person that has major depression and anxiety and a whole bunch of other things, but that is not the core of who I am. That is a mental disorder based on a whole bunch of genetic and epigenetic factors, and then you get guidance and things like that as how to control that. But that is not the entirety of my of who I am as a person. Gender dysphoria is a disorder. The therapeutic is transgenderism. It's so important. Transgenderism is an action. It is not an identity. This is really, really important. That's why people can, quote, detransition. If you can detransition, then obviously it is not native to who and what you are as a being. I cannot transition from being a black person. I can say I feel white. There's lots of black people that feel white. I would love to be white. There's no surgery that's going to get you there, bruh.
You don't have to answer to charges of oppressing a group you won't even acknowledge exists.
People with gender dysphoria exist. Everybody knows that. If you go in a DSM, the DSM will tell you that what should happen is we should socially transition you, we should chemically transition you, and we should surgically transition you. All of which creates a giant income stream for Big Pharma. You have a patient for life. You have a patient for life. You guys are good Marxists. You guys are good anti-capitalists. You guys can see the capitalistic kind of subterfuge in almost everything, but you can't see it here. If you were a nasty, horrible pharmaceutical company, what would you want to happen? What kind of therapeutics would you want to happen if you were a nasty, capitalistic, big pharma person? Would you want affirm them in their sex assigned at birth? You wouldn't want that if you were a big pharmaceutical person. You'd want the option that creates millions of dependent people on your medication that they have to buy for the rest of their lives over decades. Right? If you're an evil capitalist, that's what you're looking for, right? Trans person. Trans means that you transition. That is an action. That is not an identity. That is so important. Your identity is you're a human being created in the image and likeness of God, crowned with glory and honor. There was never a you before, and there will never be a you again. And there's something about God that you reflect that no human being has ever done or ever will. That is your identity. That is where you come from. That is where you are. But you, trans person like me, are in a sinful world, and in a sinful world, things happen that fuck us up. I did not volunteer for major depression or anxiety. My mother didn't volunteer for bipolar disorder, and you didn't volunteer for gender dysphoria. It didn't change my identity. Everything I said about myself, being an image bearer of God and all the rest of it, and my speciality and my uniqueness, all still true. But now I have to deal with the fact that I have major depression and anxiety disorders. And that's why since day one, I've been hospitalized for it. Since day one, I've been trying to demystify and destigmatize having a mental illness and then getting help from it, etc. And there's almost an ableist sort of thread throughout transgenderism where you say, no, you have a mental illness, and they immediately get offended. And I'm like, wait a second, why are you so offended? Is something wrong with people with mental illness? Are we less valuable? Are we less intelligent because we have a mental malady? What? How can you be insulted to say you have a mental health issue? How is that insulting unless you believe somehow that like people who don't have mental health issues are superior to those who do?
You don't have to take that any more seriously than somebody saying, oh, you're oppressing them because they're an elf. It's not a sophisticated tactic. Trolls in my comments section were pulling this one back in 2020, claiming that they can't be transphobic because trans people aren't really a thing. But it doesn't have to be sophisticated.
I gotta tell you, I'm genuinely confused when people say that trans people aren't a thing. Like somebody told me there are no trans kids. I don't know what they're saying when they're saying that. So somebody could explain that to me. I mean, I don't have an opinion on it. Somebody can explain that to me. That would be helpful. Yes, Jet, Christ is king. I agree.
To work, especially when the man in charge is essentially an internet troll and he's handing huge swaths of the government to a man who is openly and proudly an internet troll. And the checks and balances meant to keep them from doing whatever it is they want are all under control of Trump's political party. And in that case, a troll tactic can be brute forced into actual policy.
Well, I'll give you 50% on that. The government is not supposed to go and police my speech. What Twitter was doing before the Elon takeover was demonstrably wrong, and I'm glad there aren't supposed to be checks and balances on free speech. This is America, and I never thought I'd ever be one of those people, because I assumed certain things about everybody in the Western world. But here we are. This is America. So I'm going to give you 50% on that, because Trump is a troll, and he doesn't try to be anything other than that. And he encourages, we always used to say in church, what the leader does in rarity, the followers will do in excess, right? So I definitely believe in holding Trump accountable to be more presidential, operate with more dignity, etc., etc. Vin, check the Rumble chat more often. Oh, my bad. I have not been checking the Rumble chat. Good call out. We continue. Let me pull up Rumble real quick here, because I just got called out for missing the Rumble chat. Shout out to all the Rumbillions, by the way. Much love to the Rumbillions. I know there's probably a bunch of people mad at me in the Rumbillions thing, but what can I do? What can I do, dear listener? There's nothing I can do about it. Here we go. Trump attacks the trans community. And let me pull this out. Jet in this bitch. What's up, Jet? Kanye is absolutely hilarious, and I am a Jew. Okay. All right, let me pop this chat out here. We'll continue here to land this plane here. You beautiful people. All right, let's keep going. Somebody's got to work with these titles from Mr. Trump, though. Defending women from gender ideology, extremism, and restoring biological truth to the federal government. I mean, my God, you couldn't come up with something. Anyway, we continue.
And you need to know it's going to get worse.
There you go.
And it's already in defense.
There, it's going to get worse, guys. It's going to get worse. Everybody line up on the bridge. It's going to get worse.
Insensibly bad. The reason to erase acknowledgement of a population is to make it easier to do the worst things that you intend to do to them. I expect we aren't far off from a banning of trans-affirming healthcare for adults, starting with forbidding any gender-affirming.
Here we go. It's just gonna get worse, kids. It's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse. Now let me say something. I do not see how the Supreme Court could uphold a trans ban on adults. On 18-year-olds. I'm sorry, but we live in a country where an 18-year-old is entrusted by the government to kill people. You cannot tell me that that is a less consequential decision than transitioning your own body. Killing somebody is destroying another person's body. Transing yourself is transing yourself. I'm sorry, this is America, and I do not see in America where that is possibly going to happen. Unless there's some sort of precedent, I'd like to know. But as far as kids go, of course. And listen to me, young trans person. This person grew up never being able to, quote, transition when they were a kid. This person started this shit about 2 years ago. So he's trying to talk like, yo, this is blah, 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 blah. He's trying to make it sound like, oh man, this is the end of the world, da 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 da. When he knows he existed in the world before all this stuff got highlighted, and he was completely fine in the sense that nobody came after him, nobody's gonna beat him up, and he didn't jump off a bridge, obviously. But he ain't gonna tell you that. He's going to make it sound like from the beginning we had all this stuff on the websites and in our documents and all that. We've had this forever. No, we have not. The vast majority of this person's life, they didn't see none of this stuff as a kid. So he's trying to act like there's never been an America where this hasn't been, when he's completely and totally not telling you that. And I'm not going to say he's disingenuous. He's obviously very emotional right now. So I don't think he's lying. And look, he's doing his best to try to, hey, to be clear, this is currently speculative. Okay? But you should not speculate like that with kids who are already in the danger zone of self-harm and suicide. And no, it has not been confirmed universally that the reason that trans people have increased self-harm and suicide is because they don't get support from their families. Ridiculous. All mental maladies come with some sort of comorbidity. So depression and anxiety increases the chances that you're going to harm yourself, but that is not the fault of my parents or my family. My family was massively supportive of me, but there are some mental maladies that comport toward self-harm and injury. We all know there's a connection between autism and transness. We don't know what it is, but nobody's going to say, well, I mean, crazy person might say it, but you made this person autistic because you didn't accept their transness. No, there are, these things are called comorbidities. Okay? And so depression, anxiety, things like that are comorbidities of a person that has gender dysphoria. And do not say nobody was supporting them. The thing wouldn't have made it to the DSM if this wasn't an issue that was coming up where people wanted guidance for help. And the therapeutic that was given at the time was that they're going to desist when they get to be adults. Everything is going to be fine. And for the most part, that's what happened. Then y'all took over, and then all of a sudden the bridges started getting populated with people jumping all over the place. We continue.
From anyone of any age in a federally funded program like Medicaid or Medicare, or insurance plans provided to federal employees or military personnel. And then it'll expand out from there, and they'll put pressure on private insurers and doctors. And every single one of these things, he said he would do. Every
Well, private insurers and doctors. Thank you for bringing that up. Dear listener, dear trans person, if you were a doctor or a private insurer, what side would you be on? Remember capitalism. Don't be naive and think all these doctors that are doing this with y'all and to y'all, they're just good-natured people. Man, let me tell you, some hospitals are businesses just like anybody else. In Maine, one of the hospitals shut down. They weren't getting enough traffic, literally. So you had to combine hospitals. Like the last kid that we had was in the hospital. We didn't have a very good experience, right? Like, those things are businesses just like anything else. Okay? We continue.
single person who voted for him has to own this. And it doesn't matter what the rationale is that you had for voting for him if you did. He said he would do these things. You heard him say he would do these things. And even if you voted for him because of the price of fucking eggs, you decided the price of eggs was...
I love these people. I love these people, how they just dismiss the struggles of these people. First of all, who's complaining about the eggs? Which demographic in the country is responsible for the eggs getting into the fridge? Most of the time when you're in Walmart, women are doing that shopping. It was white women that were worried about the eggs. You can dismiss the eggs if you want. You are less than 1% of the population, ma'am. You want to tell this lady who's got a family of 3 or 4, fuck your kids and being able to feed them and being able to house them and all the rest of it. Because obviously, if you have a problem with eggs, you're going to have a problem with your mortgage, you're going to have a problem with your car note, blah, 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 right? And you're telling those people, it doesn't matter. I want to be put on the website with a T. They took the T out, hurt my feelings, and now we're supposed to put on this giant guilt trip on. Ooh, Now these white people are supposed to feel guilty because this lady voted in the interest of her family and her children. This is what I mean. You guys start on this, here's what's going to happen. That white lady who voted for Trump, she's going to be like, that's right, blah, 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 blah. There's a reason that these votes are anonymous. It was white women that did this. It was white women that did this because they're the ones at the store. They're the ones that are seeing the price. My poor wife, she sent me the bill. She said, "Look at this," because we DoorDash our I don't know what they call it, but we DoorDash our groceries, right? She said, "Look at this, $500." I was like, SubhanAllah. She said, "You're gonna think that I didn't buy anything." Like, those people are really feeling it. If you don't have any children, which obviously the LGBT community, they've got the least instances of children. You've got a lot of disposable income, and so you don't understand. You don't understand the significance of expensive eggs, because a lot of y'all do not have little people depending on you. So to you, the egg thing is an inconvenience. I'm saying the proverbial you. But to the mom, whose responsibility it is to make sure that her kids are nourished and safe and good and all the rest of it, and a lot of women do the budget balancing. Like Sori's sister, she's the accountant for her family, not professionally, but and look, you know, they do their thing with the coupon and all that stuff. That thing is a science in and of itself. What those women do with those coupons or whatever, it's a science of its own. So now here and these people understand this guilt tripping, this faux guilt tripping that you try to put on people, it's not working. They don't care because they realize that you guys don't care. Y'all had a trans person go in that school and shoot up a bunch of little Christian kids. And Dave Packman and a bunch of y'all were like, well, you got to make sure you gender the shooter correctly. I kept trying to tell y'all, what do you think is going to happen? You honestly think that people feel guilty for voting Trump because you're offended because a letter got deleted from a website? This girl ran in there and shot up all these people, and all y'all had to say was, don't misgender the shooter. Some of y'all were saying, well, shit, man, hey, votes have consequences. I saw a lot of votes have consequences because the state that she did the killing in voted to only have not mixed sports or something like that. And so those kids deserve to die because their parents voted for that. Like, you had trans people saying the craziest shit. So after you guys did that, there was a decided mood swing in the country that y'all haven't recovered from because you are so self-absorbed that you don't even know what y'all did. This was the first time we had a school shooter where we had a contingency of people calling the shooter a victim. So now you want to sit here and put all this guilt on you did this, and man, they don't care. You guys wrung out the last vestiges of pity with those people.
More important than the lives of other people. This is your fault. And I will not absolve you. And yes, that does regrettably mean there are members of my own family that I never want to see again.
I mean, I feel bad for your family. But you've got to be one of the most self-absorbed narcissists on the face of the planet if you can tell a single woman with 3 children that the inflation that she was experiencing just needed to continue so that there can be a T on a website. Y'all don't understand why you've turned people who were absolutely down with advocating for you. You've turned people against you. And it's because of shit like this. The nerve, the absolute nerve of this person. It's insane. It's insane. And again, the thing that gets me emotional is the young trans people watching them. Because this is another thing that's going on. You got that weirdo over on Twitter, and he's telling these kids to go no contact with their parents. And now here you are, one of the leaders in this movement, and you're out here saying as a grown man, I'm not going to talk to somebody because they voted for Trump. Well, you're established, you got your own home, whatever. What is a 16, 17-year-old trans teen going to do? What are they going to do? They're going to go no contact with their parents. And then life is going to get exponentially more difficult for them. And then they turn this on and see this nonsense. You see why these kids are jumping off bridges? You out here telling these kids you're going to go non-contact with people who voted for Trump because they were under economic duress? Or like my son walked up to me and asked me if he was going to get drafted because there's all these conflicts that blew up in the world once your friend Mr. Biden jumped in. Should I then look at you and say I'm never going to speak to you again if you're a mixed race person because you voted for Joe Biden, the author of the crime bill? Let me ask you something, Miss Council of Geeks person. Who's done more damage with what? Have trans people been more damaged because a letter's taken off of a website, or have black people been damaged, our entire race, because of the crime bill? When do we have CIA and FBI files like COINTELPRO that talk about specifically going after black leaders and destroying us from the inside out? When has there been a concerted effort from the most from the richest country ever on the planet that has almost infinite resources against one group of people? Should I then say, hey, you voted for Joe Biden and you knew the man was an avowed racist and you voted for him anyway? This is your fault. The crime bill is your fault. All the struggles that black people are going through now is your fault because you voted for Joe Biden. Is that what should happen? You know, Massey, which I know you don't know who Massey is because she's not trans, but Massey's a black lady that got killed. They shot her in the face in her own home during the Biden administration. You know, President Biden, after one of your people went and killed all them Christians, it was like 2 days later, he's like, it's a trans day of visibility. After a trans person just killed a whole bunch of us. The trans day of visibility. But you're being genocided, man, if you don't stop. If you don't stop. This kind of self-centered narcissism is insane. This is insane. This is more of a mental malady than gender dysphoria. This is insanity, but this is what happens. This is the face of a privileged individual who lost the privilege and is fuming and angry because of it. This is not the face of oppression. This is not the face of fear. This is the face of, I've gotten everything I've always wanted collectively at the meta level, and now people are starting to say no to me, and I can't cope. That's what this is. It's just true. Do you hate Biden anymore? He's like Weekend at Bernie's at this point. I don't hate Biden at all. I don't hate Joe Biden. Joe Biden has never pretended to be anything other than what he was. Kamala Harris stood up on that stage and confronted him about it. He didn't say, I'm sorry. He said, oh, it's a states' rights issue, which was literally what all the racists were saying back then. He didn't change his position. He told Kamala, deal with it. And then he went up to Charlemagne and said, you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Yet you still voted for Biden. So if you have any, we should cut you off and never speak to you again. Ridiculous. You voted for Joe Biden because you have a list of issues that are important to you, and what was going on with black people wasn't one of them. And there's nothing wrong with you for that. You're white. You're closer to Biden's political ideology than Trump's. So you voted for that person because you thought that was better for you. I'm not going to go after you for voting after your own. Listen, I never got mad at white people for voting in Joe Biden. They got interests. Those are you're responsible for your family. Those are your interests. I'm going to vote for my interests. You vote for yours. But I'm not going to, the only time I had a problem was when weird white people would tell me, You can't vote for Trump. You're black. What are you doing? That's the only time I got angry. But you know, this is a vacuous. These people don't understand like the effect that they have on other people. You voted for Trump. You're responsible for that. Now you're not going to talk to your family. Look, man, I don't care if this guy talks to his family ever again. I do care if you talk to your mother ever again. I do care if you initiate some sort of self-imposed exile, which then you're going to turn on your parents and then complain about your parents, and then you've created this entire narrative about who you are and what's going on, when in reality you're just listening to this guy go off at the mouth. Half of the shit he says is untrue, and he knows it's untrue. Half of it is another 20% of it's exaggerated. He knows he's exaggerated, and all the anger and invective you see here is not because a civil rights issue has come upon. Because if that was the case, he'd have been mad at Biden. If that was the case, look at his face. Go find. I'll give you $100 right now. Go find me a video where he has his face talking about Gaza. You know, the people that are really getting fucked up. Get me a video where he looks like that for the Gazans. Complete and total self-centered narcissism. This is dangerous. This is dangerous. You're a middle-aged grown person. You're talking to people who are 15, 16, 17, who believe that you know something and understand something that their parents don't. And you're out here providing the example that you're never going to talk to your family again because they voted for Trump. So if this person is the child of a single mother who's getting fucked up at Walmart every single time she goes, and she makes a play for her daughters because she's a single mom and life is really hard for single mothers, you don't know what that's like because you've never been a mother. You can't be one. So this single mother's out here doing whatever she can, and she says, man, I might get some relief if I can get these eggs right. And she votes for Trump. Now her gender dysphoric daughter has an enemy in her mother and an example in you that she shouldn't talk to her mother anymore. This is fucked up. I don't care about what this person has to say. I don't care. You've already made your decision. You are who you are. But man, you are influencing young people to drive off a fucking cliff with this bullshit you're doing. We continue.
No matter what you were to me in the past, if you voted for this, you voted my future and even my present away.
No, they didn't.
You are not entitled to a presence in my life.
I don't care. You're still full of shit. You're so full of shit. Show me the video where you're this mad about the Gazans. Be quiet. He took a T off of a fucking website, you weirdo. Y'all had dudes fucking stripping in front of little kids. You didn't say a fucking word about it. I've been watching this person for a while. So I always watch the people in depth that don't agree with my position on stuff. So I've been watching this individual for a while. You're full of it. Look, you want me to get real meta. Here we go. You know what this guy is? He is one of these left-wing people that doesn't understand the doctrine of original sin, who looks in the mirror and hates himself because he understands that his forefathers did a whole bunch of evil shit and they continue to do evil shit. And so, because they don't have a theological understanding that there's nothing particularly wrong with white people, it just so happens that at this cycle of history that white people in America have the most power. And as I said, anytime you combine power with sin, you're going to get some sort of oppression. And the way out of that oppression is not to say all white people are bad. I have white privilege. That's bad. No, the way out of it is to say, I am blessed to be a blessing. I'm going to advocate for people who are not as blessed as me. That's how you do it. But, this person doesn't have that kind of theology. We're in a social religion with sacraments and everything. And their social religion, the ultimate gospel, is guilt. But because they don't have an atonement, they don't have anybody that paid for the guilt of themselves and their forefathers, they're having a very hard time reconciling, enjoying that privileged position while at the same time understanding it was wrong. And because they don't have Christianity to synthesize that, they've come up with all types of weirdo shit. This is a religion. He has now excommunicated his family because of a vote. This is his religion. He's religiously dedicated to this. Why? Because now he can say that he's part of a marginalized community and actually not have to pay any prices. So now when he looks in the mirror, he can look at a person who's marginalized and say, hey, I'm just as fucked up as all those black people. So yeah, I mean, Andrew Jackson, those are my ancestors, but I'm getting just as fucked up as them. And that's why they keep making correlations between this and slavery and this and the civil rights movement. There is no correlation whatsoever, but because of this, white people are bad, men are bad, people with privilege are bad. You now jump into this identity, and now you can say that you're one of the persecuted. When you know good and well, you're going to wake up tomorrow and do exactly what you did the day before. And nothing is going to happen to you. And you also know that if you catch somebody on camera beating the shit out of you, bad things are going to happen to them. They're going to get fired, all types of shit. You know that. Stop. The kid doesn't know that, though. The kid who you're influencing doesn't know that you're full of shit. The kid that you're influencing doesn't understand that you grew up the majority of your life without this shit on websites and you were just fine. We continue.
That said, I do see people on the left reveling in schadenfreude and laughing at TikToks from Trump voters, panicking at services and benefits they depend on being stripped from them. I'm not incapable of seeing the irony, but I can't even take a, hey, you asked for this, now you got it. Oh, never thought the leopards would eat my face kind of dark pleasure in that. I can't. For those voters, I will not forgive them. But I don't want them to suffer. I don't want anyone to suffer.
You won't forgive them. But see, she has theologized a vote. She has created a moral ramification based on a vote. This is what I'm saying. This is a religion. Rest in peace, Runaway Siren. She was the first one. She says, I'm not going to go along with this trans stuff because I have religious freedom. That's y'all's religion. It is, because the fact of the matter is, you do not have physicalist scientific support for your ideology, because you're making a distinction between your physical and your metaphysical, and you're putting the metaphysical over the physical. That is not contemporary scientific methodology. That's the exact opposite. That's religion. This is your religion. You've excommunicated these people, and there's no atonement in your religion. So now these people are excommunicated, but now here you are being all Christ-like. You're not going to forgive them, but you're not going to mock them in the suffering that they deserve. See, now they're in hell. They're in voting hell because they voted for the wrong person. This is a religion.
And I can't see something like that and not be painfully aware that there's a ton of other people having the same benefits stripped from them who didn't vote for this. That even the people who did vote for this, many of them have children. Those children certainly didn't vote for this. And even if that wasn't the case, I still wouldn't want them to suffer. I want people to be able to live.
Well, if you want them to be able to live, you should stop encouraging these kids to kill themselves with the bullshit that you're putting out here. If you truly want people to live, then you would stop and think for 2 seconds that it's a real dumb and dangerous thing to tell somebody that if their family member voted for Trump, you're never going to speak to him again and you're never going to forgive him again. Because you know that you're full of shit and that's not true, but the 16-year-old does it.
Don't let my hate shape me the way they let theirs shape them. But even as everything gets worse for everyone, I still feel the need to highlight what is happening to trans people. And it's not just because I am trans.
It is. It is. I've never seen a trans person like this get this upset for any other group of people. Not once. Like, this person's genuinely upset and hateful. She gave Gaza like a half a second in this video. So it is. The Gazans are actually dying. In horrible ways. Nobody's asking any Gazan their pronoun. Nobody cares. None of this shit was going on in Gaza. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? You got spots all over the world. Them Gazan kids ain't killing themselves. There isn't a high suicide rate in Saudi Arabia, where none of this shit would even happen, where even none of this shit is even mentioned. Give me the stats for the suicide rates in Saudi and all these other countries that don't have this. That they don't have this. All the suicide rates are high in countries that are promoting this shit.
But because many of the most sweeping changes, like the aforementioned birthright citizenship, are going to get hung up, not only by the court system, but also by Republican infighting. Many of these orders won't have much force behind them without new supporting bills from Congress. The GOP may indeed control Congress, but it is by such a thin margin that it only takes a few of them deciding that they aren't getting what they want and they can just jam up the whole system. A lot like Joe Manchin kept doing to the Democrats when they had control of the Senate. The reality is, huge swaths of this party can't stand each other. And a lot of things that some of them want are going to rile others up. Not in huge numbers, but at least sometimes in enough numbers that it'll slow things down or possibly even halt some things before they get off the ground. You remember how, even with full control of Congress at the start of Trump's first term, they couldn't agree on how to repeal the Affordable Care Act, so it just never happened? Or how long it took to get a new Speaker of the House in place after the far right threw a hissy fit and booted the previous one? That sort of thing will be the case for at least some of this stuff. But it won't be the case for trans rights. Because outside of a very small number of governors and state-level legislators, nobody in the Republican Party has or will stand up for trans rights.
Yeah. Well, AOC, after she talked to everybody and said, why did you vote for me and Trump at the same time? After she got done that focus group, guess what? She took out her pronouns. So don't try to put this on the Republicans. Don't try to put this on Republicans. By the way, AOC wasn't talking to a group of Republicans. She was talking to a group of Democrats. She was talking to people who previously voted for Joe Biden. When she got done talking to those Democrats who voted for Trump and her and left everything else blank, when she got done that focus group, she took out her pronouns. Stop trying to make this about a left-right issue. Young person, this is an America issue. White women, black women, white men, black men, all of us grew up, all of us are kids in the 90s. All of us are 90s kids. And all of us know that before all this shit started, we all had a weird friend, we all had a whatever, and we were weird too. And everybody got along. Sorry, I didn't know that weird. What was the word? What did I say? Did I? Did I? Yeah. Okay, sorry. Apologies, I'm serious, my bad. All right, where were we? Let's just continue. I got interrupted. We continue. I was on a roll though.
It's one of the only things they are fully united on doing, with no real...
Oh, yeah, it's not just the Republicans, Mom. It's not just the Republicans. It's Democrats too. I told you. And look, I told you guys this. I told you guys this for years, literally. It's not just Republicans. A young person, don't listen to her. Bunch of Democrats too. Bunch of progressives that don't believe in this shit either. And the reason you don't see more is because look what happened to Anna Kasparian when she actually said something. If y'all would have listened to Anna Kasparian, you'd have a lot more rights right now. We continue.
Disagreement about how it should be done, because they don't care. The Republicans that don't actively hate us have no reason to obstruct.
Yeah, so I have a friend. She was a feminist. Her name was Runaway Siren. She was a diabetic and had a teaching degree, but America was too expensive for her. And so she was in Cambodia. And I'd always be like, hey, you good? You need anything? No, I'm good. I don't need anything. Last time we had a conversation, she's like, yeah, I'm going to America, blah, 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 blah. I gotta get some health stuff checked up. Blah, blah, blah. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm like, hey, traveling is a bitch. Like, let me get, we can get you some, She wasn't answering me. And then her friend shot the video. And she always, like, when she would end her video, she'd say, this dear viewer is where we part. And I always say, dear listener. Well, I was like, oh. She had an episode, and she didn't make it. She was in Cambodia, and I wasn't there. Her best friend wasn't there. Her dad wasn't there. There was some trying to prove that she could make it on her own without any male help at all. And she died. And so her friend shot a video basically explaining to us what happened to her. And the trans people went to her video and just started gloating about the fact that she died. Mocking the fact that she died. Because this girl, this woman, refused to go along with gender ideology. I'm not saying anything. I went to her, I went there, but I knew not to go after the initial announcement because I knew that those people were going to show up. Because to be quite frank with you, some of you are the most bitter, horrible, to the core human beings that God has ever made. Some of you are so full of hate. And the hate begins with yourself. And unfortunately, you were coddled so much that the simple fact of a person disagreeing with you makes you happy at their death. So I'm not surprised. I think about her every day. I look at the conversations me and her had. She was really, really concerned with the safety of women. I had no idea relative to violence, the stats that she would share with me, or the manifestos of dudes that would go into gyms and like target women. She really opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. So I couldn't bear to see anybody dishonor her. Because I want to see any of y'all go to the lengths that she went to be independent. But I really don't, because it ultimately ended up killing her. But she was in a world as a woman where she felt like there was no place for women like her anymore. And yeah, I know the caliber of the people. So yeah, I had a hard, But anyway, my point is, everybody's either the hero or the villain in their own story. The hero or the victim in their own story. They're never the villain. Hey, trans person. Maybe in certain stories you're the victim. Is it possible that in other stories you're the villain? Is that possible? Is it possible that in some people's stories you're incredibly selfish, self-centered, and narcissistic? Is that possible? Oh, all the bad feelings people have about you is because you guys are just innocent, good people who are just trying to be who you are. Tell me, dear listener, how many other groups of people get on TikTok and encourage children to go no contact with their own parents? Who does that? No contact. I remember when the gays were trying to get their shit going, and I'd listen to these shows, and like the parents are like not accepting me, blah 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 blah, and the gay dude would be like, you know what? Your parents, they got religion or whatever. It's an initial shock, or maybe they knew it the whole time, but if you get out and start to live your life, they're eventually going to miss you and call you back. That's how it happens to most of us. Sometimes it doesn't happen, but generally that's how it happens. That's what I grew up hearing. Now you got these weirdos looking at the cameras at TikTok and telling these children to go no contact with their parents, but he will talk to them.
The ones who do.
Now, having said that, Nancy Mace used the word tranny, I believe, in the House, in the floor of Congress. Unacceptable. She should have got held accountable for that. But what's happening is people are at war. They see stuff like this. They see stuff of what I just said. And because of the brutality of some of these people, like what I just explained happened to my friend, now people feel they got carte blanche to go out and say all types of weirdo slurs and things like that. This is what I call the Trumpification of America, where people are now bold enough to go out and say all types of crazy shit about people. Miss Mace, just like I despise this person for giving children the impression that the whole world is against trans people, I have equal invective for you, because you are giving truth to that lie. Most people in the world are not like you, Miss Mace. Now listen, I know you've been sexually assaulted by men, and I know that you take you're just going to go with the science and that these are men. I understand that, but the floor of Congress is not the place for you to ventilate your issues with these people. You're supposed to represent all Americans, ma'am, including the trans people in your fucking constituency, you weirdo.
So what happens to trans people will happen faster and more aggressively than possibly any other group. In many ways, we are
than any other group. Those Palestinians. Hey, when you're driving a car and you see cop car, you see blue lights, you think they're gonna jam you up, beat the hell out of you, so your kids can watch your dead body on TV while a bunch of people at the bottom are talking about how funny and awesome it was? Good night. If a cop sneezed in the direction of a trans person, they'd write out a 10-page apology.
Canary in the coal mine for how bad things are liable to get for every minority group the Republicans have targeted, which is...
Black people, don't listen to this woman. Nothing's going to get bad for you because Trump is in office. Nothing's going to be good for you because Trump's in office. It's America. It's America. When Trump was in office the first time, nothing happened to you for being black. Don't listen to this propagandist here. I'm going to tell you that, black people, because we already know. But there's a lot of young trans people that are really going to believe this shit. She doesn't know what she's talking about.
Basically every minority group except the wealthy. First they came for the trans people, and I did not speak out. You know how this goes. And even if you're not trans, or even if you don't...
Now we're going to make a Holocaust reference. Oh, you guys are going to get Holocausted too?
Don't care about trans people. Even if you care about a single vulnerable group, you should be paying attention to what's going on. Because we are the test run for how far they can push things. As to what can we do about it, right now, not a lot. The Democratic Party was barely supported.
You can stop listening to this weirdo. You can get outside and touch the grass and realize that the people in your Reddit crew or the people in your whatever are not the actual landscape of the United States of America. You can go outside and talk to human beings. You'll see, young person, that she's full of shit here.
Of the trans community in the first place, and have already signaled their willingness to let Trump burn the country to the ground in the hope that it means they'll start winning elections again later on. They'll act outraged, point at what he's doing, and fail to offer a plan of action to do anything other than point and be outraged.
Well, it's because he's got science on his side. I mean, what constitutional violation is there to say that we're only going to recognize the two sexes that are able to progenate other Homo sapiens? There's nothing to do about that.
Yes. Come the midterms, we need to vote Democrat, if only for the barest hope of survival. But we also need better Democrats. Honestly, we need a better party altogether, but the potential for breaking the two-party system stranglehold on this country is not something I see as being within even the most optimistic of reaches. Yes, we need to protest and shout and fight and make it clear that we know what they're doing and we're not okay with it, because to do otherwise is to signal that nobody's going to fight them on this. But these protests are unlikely to have meaningful change so long as a party that doesn't care if trans people live or die, and also don't care what anyone thinks about what they do, has control of all three branches of government.
Here we go. There's the doom speaking. They don't care if you live or die. Your mom who voted for Trump because she wants to feed you, she doesn't care if you live or die. But you don't know that because you can't talk to your mom anymore because this fucking weirdo said so.
Yes, we need to embrace and celebrate those willing to actually state openly and forcefully that we exist and deserve rights, even as those statements are unlikely to move the needle. We need to do whatever we can to hold on, because the alternative is to give them exactly what they want and accept the fate of being eradicated from public life entirely. I, for one, am...
You liar. He did not say he wants trans people eradicated from public life. He said he wanted transgenderism. It's an ism. Like racism. Or other schisms. That's what he said. And I've heard a bunch of leftists say conservatism needs to die, capitalism needs to die, fascism needs to die, Christo-fascism needs to die. None of those things are saying that Christians need to die. They're saying that the ism needs to die because it's bad for the collective. And Michael Knowles said that he felt bad for people afflicted with gender dysphoria and that trans ideology needs to be eradicated from public life. And you are not disproving him. Because here you go, a trans person of influence out here telling these 16-year-olds that there's some sort of correlation between the Holocaust and them going to the bathroom that they were born as. You're trying to make a correlation between the two, and they're all fucked up on hormones and puberty and all the rest of this shit. They're so confused, and their parents can't relate to them at all, so they go to the internet, and here you come saying all this dumb shit.
Willing to keep going out of the sheer spite of knowing that every day in which I exist publicly as myself, it makes them so fucking mad.
I've never been angry seeing a trans person. I'm angry at trans suicides. I'm angry at these kids who get influenced by people like you and end up dying, and then their parents get to live the rest of their lives blaming themselves because their child was born with a comorbidity, and instead of society and her guidance counselors, her doctors coming around and doing the right thing for her, they fill her head with all kind of nonsense. She's completely confused, and then she goes and sees you and jumps off a bridge. I'm angry about that. Nobody I know has ever been angry about a trans person being trans person. I've never met anybody who's like, look at this fucking person being trans. I hate him. I've never seen it.
Trans, please do whatever you can to get into a safe situation and to take care of yourself. If you are not trans and you want to know what to do, mostly start small and start local. If you have trans friends, support them in any way that you are able to do. If you have a local queer-focused advocacy group, contact them and ask them what will help. There is only so much that any one person can do about the national level. And I don't need what allies we have burning themselves out, pounding their fists on the wall of the federal government. Help as you can, focus local. If you don't have local organizations, then support Trans Lifeline, Human Rights Campaign, and similar groups as best you can, be it through monetary donations or volunteering. Do what you can. Keep yourself safe.
If somebody can get me like a non-crazy trans group that takes care of kids, like kids who are like on the street or some shit like that, please send me an email, vincestory@gmail.com. Get me one of those that we can work with, so we can get something good about having to endure this person.
And hold on to each other. I want nothing more than to offer optimism. But for at the very least the next 2 years, I don't realistically have any. But I can say that whenever you find joy, no matter how small, hold on to it. Because queer joy is the strongest counter we have right now. Making it clear that we won't just roll over into silent misery the way they want us to. For me...
Who's they? Who's they? They. Hold queer joy. That's your biggest weapon. You know what I think your biggest weapon is, trans young person? Your mind. Your mind is your biggest weapon. And if you can get the vision to see that the people older than you are using rhetoric because they think it's going to influence people, but they don't really mean it, then you've got a shot. If you follow this woman, you have no chance in hell. In this life or the next, honestly. Honestly. Because Jesus ran into a guy who hated him a lot. Wanted to kill him, wanted to kill his disciples. And he said something to him very, very interesting. He said, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. You know, these farmers, you know, they'd have these oxen. And oxen are kind of rebellious creatures. So they'd always kick backwards. And it'd be very inconvenient when you're trying to till your land. So you had these little spikes that you'd put in the back. So when the oxen would kick, he would push against these spikes. And then he'd get angry and he would do it again. So every time it would happen, he would do it again until he was socialized to understand, you don't want to do that, man. So Jesus goes up to this guy and says, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Why are you going after me? It's hard for you to kick against the goads. See, when you set yourself up against reality, it's not going to move for you. That's what Jesus is saying. Reality is not going to move for you. Reality is not going to accommodate you. So Paul, the reality is, this guy is truly God, truly God. He is ultimate reality. And anything you do is just going to bloody your ankles, man. Because you're going up against ultimate reality, and that will not compromise with you. Dear trans person, there is an ultimate reality. Here it is. There's a God in heaven. And he made us male and female. And the male has a role and a means of glorifying God and expressing who God is on the earth. And the female has been given to us as a means of understanding God. And there is no way humanity can have any understanding of God without both. That is the ultimate reality. People talk about gender assigned at birth. Dear listener, your doctor hasn't assigned a damn thing to you. But the God who made you in the womb assigned you. These people, at the fundamental level, are here to deny reality. That is not what I'm hearing from Buck Angel. Buck Angel is saying, I'm a woman with gender dysphoria, and I feel better doing this stuff, but I'm still a woman. That's reality. You're bucking up against reality, and that is the vast majority of the psychological consternation that you're feeling. Forget about the spiritual stuff. This is not the solution.
I have a family that I cherish. Wonderful partners.
That you cherish if they voted correctly. If they voted out of economic anxiety, you're never going to talk to them again. That's what you just said to us, man. Unless you're going to change that, inshallah.
Good friends. And also what's been surprisingly helpful, while this seems like a small thing, I made myself a Defiance playlist. Songs that make me feel like I'm standing up and saying, no, I love living and I won't be pushed away. And it has some of the stuff you might expect. Killing in the Name of by Rage Against the Machine. T-Rex from the Nimona soundtrack. What's Up Danger from the Into the Spider-Verse soundtrack. But most of the playlists is stuff that just calls on you to be unapologetically and raucously yourself. The greatest show.
But what if that single mom who is unapologetically and raucously herself votes to afford eggs? And you just told this person that you're not going to talk to her again. So are you now persecuting your own family member for being who they are? Can a person who's a Trump supporter raucously be who they are around you? You see the hypocrisy in this? Young trans person?
Raise your glass. And yeah, Pink Pony Club. It brings me joy. It keeps me going. Find what keeps you going. Thank you for listening. If you have made it to the end, it's very important to me, now more than ever, that you be well, be safe, be kind, and remember that you are beautiful, you are valid, you are loved.
I'm not even going to comment on that one. I'm going to comment on that last part. You are beautiful because you're in the image of God, and God is a perfection of beauty, dear listener. Look, some of this is the philosophical superstructure that makes people like that possible. Is starting to completely disintegrate. It's one of the reasons why the left is in the situation it's in. It's one of the reasons why Anna and Emma can't seem to get along, where a year ago they were like in complete lockstep. It's because people on that side of the aisle tend to abandon the concept of ultimate truth or objective truth. Instead, they go for an ideology that says everybody's truth is personal, and everybody's personal version of the truth is valid unless it makes me feel bad. So even though I'm born physically and obviously and scientifically a male, I feel a certain way. So now everybody's duty bound to say how I feel, even if it's not actually true in ultimate reality. And so everybody in the left went along with that. And then the wheels started to come off, because when you try to actually practice that in real life, the wheels will come off because it's not true. That 6'2" person should not have been anywhere near a girls' volleyball tournament. Leah Thomas should not have been in that gym, should not have been in that locker room with his erect penis around a bunch of naked girls, entering the peak of their physical powers. These are college girls about to go to college. They told one of these girls that if you have a problem with being naked in front of William Leah Thomas with his erect penis, that they could talk to the local psychologist at the school, because they're crazy. So, look, guys, this is not really about left or right. This is about the philosophical underpinnings that you have that help you interpret reality and then react to reality. And one of the ways to know whether or not you're operating in reality is if you can be consistent with yourself throughout. We've just reviewed a 17-minute conversation and every other thing was a contradiction. They cannot be consistent with it. And that's why you're seeing the Democrats and the leftists, everything is crazy. And now you have all these little subcamps. So the left is weaker now than it's ever been. And a guy like Trump is supposed to be a galvanizing figure to the opposition party, but he's not, because you don't have a philosophical perspective that can hold the weight of diverse opinions while simultaneously going in one direction. That is an extremely sophisticated, complicated thing. And usually people who try to make that shit up on the fly, which is what is happening with the left side of America, you're going to crash that plane. It's better to have the plane constructed while it's on the ground than work on the plane while it's in the air. And that is what is happening to the left side of the country. They are building entirely new segments, people, customs, mores, all this. They're doing it 30,000 feet in the air. And then they're like, why does this plane keep crashing? Well, it's because you have an engineer who should know a thing or two about design. You've got an aviator guy. He should know a thing or two about how planes stay in the sky. And then you got 30 other people, and they feel like this. And they feel like the plane looks aesthetically better if you took off this wing. And the other person saying, well, the engine's going to fuck up the environment, so we should do this. And that's why every time that your planes take off, they keep crashing. That's why. And then when there's flames everywhere and everything's on fire, you turn around and look at the people that were telling you, yo, that plane is crazy, you gonna die, bro. Now you got all these bodies on the floor, it's fire everywhere, destruction, and the last person on the plane is like, this is your fault. Lady Wisdom, in the book of Proverbs, she said, those who hate me love death. These people are fools. And that's why there's so much death associated with that movement. They're fools. I don't believe that they're fools because they struggle with gender dysphoria. The struggle with gender dysphoria proves that they're humans and that they are in a sinful world where things are not as they should be. Nothing wrong with that. That's a situation we're all in. But you're a fool. When you see the thing that should not be, what you need to do is interface that with reality in such a way as to make it better for the most people possible. What you don't do is see a reality that's bad and then try to change the fundamental essence of reality itself. You cannot do anything for or against the truth. You can only submit to it, dear listener. The truth is invincible and the truth is inevitable. We are dust in the wind. I was talking to my homie 4 or 5 weeks ago. I'll never speak to her again on this side of heaven. I'm going to be gone. One day you're going to go up, you're going to look for Vin, he's going to be gone, bro. One day we're going to look for this lady. She's going to be gone, bro. We're here and then we're gone. It is ridiculous and arrogant for us to think that because we have iPhones now and we can do live streams, that all the wisdom before us was nothing. No, I don't think so. I think that we are a generation of fools, and I think that we're becoming wise. That's what I think. I think there's a lot of people, including young people, who are saying, that package of ideas is not a plane I'm going to ride anymore because it keeps crashing and it's only a matter of time before I die in one of these roller coaster plane fights with these weirdos. That's what you're seeing happen. If you're a trans person and the things I've said get coded to you as I hate you, dear listener, I'm not afraid of anybody. You say, well, You're saying people hate you. We're saying you hate us. We're not saying you're afraid of us. Nah, man. Listen, the scripture says there's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. The one who fears is in torment, and he has not been perfected in love. So the opposite of love is not hate; it's fear. And a lot of Christians are afraid of trans people, and it does not manifest in saying awful slurs to them. It manifests in saying nothing to them. Now, I might be a horrible, terrible, homophobic Christian, blah, blah, blah. But what if I'm actually right? What if our forefathers from time immemorial were right? What if, instead of this new therapeutic where we're saying we're going to take the metaphysical over the physical, what if we said, let's try to go back to dealing with the physical ramifications of what science tells us you are, and then helping you psychologically and metaphysically to arrange yourself in a way that you can accept yourself? Is the way that you guys have done it working? Oh, if more people supported us. Really? Why is it that trans people in California have some of the highest suicide rates in the world for trans people? Isn't that ground zero? Isn't that ground zero over there in San Francisco? How come there's such high suicidal ideation? Not only in the trans community, but in the LGBT community as a whole over there. That's your mecca. Maybe it's because, like the rest of us, you have comorbidities that do not promote life because you're in a fallen world. And you need healing, like all of us do. But the way some people have chose to heal themselves is by demonizing other people. Young person, if you have parents that love you, do not go non-contact with your parents. If you're going to go non-contact with your parents, you need to make sure that you have a place where you can land. And it should not be with somebody who's fucking 20 years older than you. Just think about the math. Young person, if you were walking down the street and some dude showed up to, let's say, a 10-year-old and said, hey, I heard you're having a problem with your mom. You shouldn't talk to anymore, but you can come hang out with me at my house. I think most of you cross the street and separate that 10-year-old from that weirdo. But y'all got people in your community that are doing that every day on TikTok. What if you're not on the side of the good guys? What if you're on the side of the bad guys? What if you're not a victim? What if you're the victimizer? I got this really, this guy that I follow on Navy SEAL, blah, blah, blah. And every time he talks to one of the guys, inevitably he asks the questions, were we the bad guys? And I used to say to myself, Sean, if you could ask that question, bro, you already know the answer. But he's talking to these other people because he invested so much of who he was as a man, as a person, as an American Army Navy SEAL. And he went out there and he did what his country told him to do. And he's made decisions that are irreversible. So now when he talks to other people who've been through what he's been through, and they see what happened, how the government lied and manipulated him, he already knows. He already knows. But he's asking the other guys, one, to show, hey man, you're not crazy. And two, when you've done something like that, you're basically the only person in the world that's done it. In the sense that there aren't a bunch of superpowers in the world. War is a very common thing. What's not common is living in a superpower and being a completely oppressive government that was on an expansion expedition. That is something unique to Americans in the last 30 years. And so it's not a universal thing that people carry. There's a lot of dudes that are carrying that, man. And so he said, are we the bad guys? And you could tell. Some of the guys say, well, of course. But You could tell that the way they've dealt with it is to say, it's just a sport. Other guy says, you see him talk, and it's just the stuff that he tells himself when he sees himself brushing his teeth in the mirror because he's hurt about what he's done and the fact that he can't undo it. What if we're the bad guys? Well, we got attacked on 9/11. I was in that class, y'all. I saw that second thing. I saw the thing go down. I'm like, okay, cool. We're going to war. Cool. Okay, you want to do that to my country? All right, we're going to see. We were attacked. You killed 3,000 of ours. We killed 1.5 million of y'all all across the world. Do you think that there's a bad guy really running around that knows he's a bad guy? Let me tell you something, man. I've been around some of the worst people on the planet Earth. Okay? They all got a story. They all got a story of the horrible trauma that happened to them that turned them into a fucking demon. All right, guys. Much love to all you beautiful people. Young trans person, I got to tell you, I'm concerned for you. And I am not concerned because of Trump. I'm concerned that you believe in the nonsense that this person was saying. She doesn't believe it. I promise you, she doesn't believe that shit. If you hold on for another day or another year, you're going to see. You're going to come to your own conclusions, and you're going to be good. But the woman who carried you in her womb, if she voted for Trump, it's because she wants to feed you. And she doesn't want to get evicted. That's why she voted for Trump. Has nothing to do with fucking you up. Has nothing to do with denying who you are as a person. It's hard out here. The mother that carried you in the womb loves you to death and would lay down her life for you. Do not let some internet personality who doesn't know you, doesn't know your mother, doesn't know your story, doesn't know your father, don't ever let any of these weirdos on the fucking internet deceive you into thinking that they love you more than your parents. They don't. They don't. This person doesn't even love you enough to watch what they're saying and think through the ramification of the bullshit that she was saying, which might negatively affect you. But your parents think about that shit all the time. You are front of mind with your parents. You may disagree with your parents as a teenager. So, that's what happens. We're a very affectionate family. We hug, kiss. I got a 19-year-old son. He's still kissing me on the mouth. That's going to happen forever. But we've had some wars, man. That's what happens between parents and kids, man. We have wars. It's okay. But we've said crazy shit, bad, terrible situations, blah, blah, blah. Man, I love him. I'd lay my life down for him. And he knows. Some of y'all don't got parents like that. You got dads that are not as demonstrative. You got dads that'll be like, I work 12 hours a day. And they were not raised, they have zero emotional intelligence. And it's not that they don't like that you like to knit instead of play football. It's not necessarily that. It's football's all I know. And every time I imagine the son, I imagine playing football, all this other shit that you're into. Like, I have no clue how to do it. I have no clue how to relate to you. I feel like I'm going to fail. It's not always, oh, you're a sissy. It's not always that. There's a lot of insecurities and difficulties that come with being a parent. So I would just plead with you to give your parents another chance. And I'd also plead with you that anytime you hear anybody on the fucking internet try to direct a child away from his parents and to them, that is not a red flag. That is a red country. That's a lot of things. That's not a red flag. The thing is already done at that point. You can mark that person. Depend on it. Honestly, with all the way that these things get censored all the time, I have no idea how a guy like that can even do that shit. But I'm ranting. Anyway, all I'm saying is, if you're a young person and you're watching this stuff, please consider that. Because there's been a lot of people that have been completely and totally fucked up, and people like this are just completely fine with that. All right. Love your neighbor. Take care of each other. Middle America, we are the media. To all the trans people in the world, I'm loving you the best I possibly can. And if you don't recognize it, I understand. Because I'm one voice, and you're hearing voices like that all the time. But that's the cool thing about being a Christian. The Lord knows my heart. Lord, please be good to these people. Please give peace to these people. God, root them in who you are. Give them a sense of identity, God. Help replace things like gender and sexual. God, I pray you replace that with being an image bearer of you. And I pray that they would understand how crazy that is to represent God on the planet Earth in such a unique way that they don't feel that they need anything else other than that. A lot of these kids have been abused. A lot of these kids have been devalued, mocked, left alone by peers, by pastors, by their parents. I pray that you'd send them friends, real tangible friends in the world. Destroy somebody's router tonight, God, and make them go outside and hang out. I pray that you give a spirit of understanding and love to the parents. God, they need so much wisdom because there's so many voices out there influencing their children. These parents need a lot of wisdom. If there's anything in me that is not of you in regards to these people, pray that you'd have the friends around me and my family let me know so we can root it out. I thank you for you giving me a heart for these people. And I thank you that you've given me the honor of being friends with these people. And I pray, God, that you, any whispering in their minds that I really don't love them, I pray that you would just make them feel for 2 seconds what I feel for them all day. God, I miss my friend. And I hope she's up there with you. And if she is, then I can forgive you for taking her. She definitely wouldn't want to trade places. All right. I love you guys. I got to get out of here. I'm a flawed individual. So I usually get it wrong, but I'm going to keep trying. I love you guys. Middle America, we are the media. Till next time, guys.